Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our regular scheduled October meeting. If you could all join me for welcoming Pastor Keith Lewis from Trinity Baptist Church. We need a little extra tonight, so.
Let's pray together. Father, how thankful we are to gather together as free American citizens in a country that we often discover to be in turmoil, but one that is ours nonetheless. We are so thankful for it, for the unique freedoms that we experience, the unique blessings that we have even on a daily basis. But tonight in this setting, we don't take for granted the raw opportunity that is ours to engage in freedom of speech, to engage in the free exercise of the exchange of ideas. Lord, we thank you for those that have gathered here tonight, both to share and to listen, for those who sit up here on this platform as those who have sacrificed time and energy, many other opportunities to lead and to serve in this way. And so in light of their sacrifice and leadership, we pray that you would arm them tonight with wisdom, with skill and success. Give them an ability to navigate all of the issues with discernment and discretion. Lord, I pray that they would make the right decisions that would be for the prospering of our city. Lord, we ask that you would protect them. As they serve in their position, theirs is a unique opportunity and one that will have unique pressure points. So I pray that you would guard their character, guard their reputation, guard their families, give them that unique ability to have a proper balance in life, which oftentimes eludes us all. Help them to navigate all that has been given to them with great success. Lord, we ask that there would be a spirit of peace and decorum and real success again this night. We ask that as agenda is worked through, that it would be done so with in good timing and with the right decisions made. We again thank you for all those who have gathered and ask that your hand would be upon all that is done tonight. We pray in the name of the one who has ordained all things, given us these opportunities, Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
Amen. You join me with the national anthem? Wow. I pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Councilor Bouchard. Here. Mayor Boulay.
Here.
Councilor Champlin.
Present.
Councilor Cohen.
Here.
Councilor Grady Sexton.
Here.
Councilor Hirschlag.
Here.
Councilor Keach.
Here.
Councilor Kennison.
Here.
Councilor Kretovic.
Here.
Councilor Mattson.
Here.
Councilor Nyan.
Present.
Councilor St. Blair.
Here.
Councilor Shirtliff.
Here.
Councilor Todd.
Here.
And Councilor Werner.
Here.
Great to see everybody this evening. Right now, we also have in front of us the minutes for the September 11th, 2017 City Council meeting. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Made and seconded. Is there any discussion, changes? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, and the minutes are approved. This takes us to item 6, which is a resolution in recognition of the services of Master Police Officer James Fallon. Okay, thank you very much. That takes us to recognition of the services of Master Police Officer Matthew Nelson. Welcome. Step right on up here. Councilor Shirtliff is going to read it. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. How you doing? Resolution 9015, City of Concord, in the year of our Lord 2017. Resolution in recognition of the services of Master Police Officer Matthew A. Nelson. The City of Concord resolves as follows. Whereas Master Officer Matthew A. Nelson has been a faithful and loyal employee of the City of Concord for 22 years within its police department. Master Police Officer Nelson began his career in 1995 as a police officer and served in the Patrol Division. In 1997, he was assigned to the Drug Enforcement Unit, where he served as an undercover capacity investigating drug-related offenses. In 2000, he served on the New Hampshire Attorney General's Drug Task Force. He returned to patrol in 2003, joined the Drug Enforcement Unit again in 2004, joined patrol in 2005, where he served until his retirement on June 30th, 2017. And whereas Master Police Officer Matthew A. Nelson served as a long arms officer and is a liaison for the homeless shelter sponsored by the First Congregational Church. And whereas Master Police Officer Matthew A. Nelson fostered a positive working relationship between the New Hampshire Attorney General's Drug Task Force, the Drug Enforcement Unit, which enabled DEU's involvement in several high-profile cases. And whereas Master Police Officer Matthew A. Nelson has received 4 commendation bars for distinguished unit action, 1 commendation bar for life-saving, the 2001 Enrique Camarana Memorial Award from the Attorney General's Drug Task Force, a certificate from the New England Narcotic Enforcement Officers Association, the John Cabone Memorial Award from the New England Narcotic Enforcement Officers Association, 2 certificates of merit for community policing, 7 letters of commendation, and many letters of appreciation from citizens, organizations, and law enforcement professionals. And whereas Matthew A. Nelson's dedication and loyalty to the Concord Police Department and the City of Concord are without question. And whereas Master Police Officer Matthew A. Nelson's work ethic, determination, energy, dedication have time and again benefited the City of Concord and the Concord Police Department. Now there be it resolved that by the City Council of the City of Concord that we are hereby record our sincere appreciation for many years of service from Master Police Officer Matthew A. Nelson to the City of Concord. Be it further resolved that we hereby acknowledge that the service and presence of Master Police Officer Matthew A. Nelson will truly be missed by the City Council, City Administration, Concord Police Department, and the entire Concord community. We extend our best wishes to him and his family during his retirement. Passed in City Council, August 14, 2017. Signed, Mayor James Boulay. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Thank you for the service.
Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thanks. Well done. You can share whatever you wish if you want.
This is your moment.
This is your last chance.
Thank you very much. I was able to work with many great police officers, men and women at the police department, and all of them walked the hero's path, and I'm just glad that they allowed me to walk it with them. Thank you.
Well said.
And now if you would join me in welcoming Phil Bilodeau. I will warn you all, this is a extremely long resolution.
I was also trying to think earlier how many times I've been in this room.
You don't want to know.
Thanks.
Welcome. This is Resolution 9030, City of Concord, in the year of our Lord 2017. Resolution recognition of the services of Philip H. Bilodeau, P.E. Yes, important P.E. The City of Concord resolves as follows. Whereas Philip Bilodeau has been a faithful and loyal employee of the City of Concord, New Hampshire for more than 33 years. Philip began his career with the City of Concord working from 1980 to 1984 as a construction coordinator in the city's Public Works Department. And whereas Philip Bilodeau returned to work for the City of Concord in 1988 as the Deputy Wastewater Superintendent. In 1989, he was promoted to Chief Engineer, and in 1994, he was made Construction Coordinator. This was followed by promotion to the Capital Improvements Engineer in 1999. And whereas Philip Bilodeau was ultimately promoted to the Deputy Director position of the General Services Department in 2002 and served as the Acting General Services Director from 2002 through March of 2003. And whereas, you pretty much covered the whole gamut. Whereas Philip Bilodeau has provided significant leadership in the transition of the General Services Department through his years working with the city into the professional public works organization it is today, representing the city's largest and most complex department. Particular note is given for his efforts supporting staff and ushering complex projects through completion. And whereas Philip Bilodeau managed the sewer separation project for the City of Concord, New Hampshire from 1980 to 1984, with a project cost of $56 million a major contribution to cleaning up the Merrimack River for future New Hampshire citizens. I don't think people realize how important that project really was. Whereas Phil Bilodeau managed many diverse projects, the City of Concord, New Hampshire Dog Park at Terrell Park, the finished water pumps at the water plant, and realized federal grants and energy rebates of 50% for the project costs. City Hall front entry refurbishments, Fire Department headquarters reuse of the Water Department facility awarded a New Hampshire Preservation Alliance Preservation Award, initiating a multi-year water main cleaning and lining program to extend and improve the water system infrastructure. Whereas Phil Bilodeau has served as the president of the New Hampshire Waterworks Association, chairman of the NHWWA Legislative Action Committee, a member of the Programs Committee, State of New Hampshire Director for the New England Waterworks Association, chair of the Management Council for the New England Waterworks Association, chair of the Utility Recognition Council, member of the Granite State Rural Water, holy smoke, Granite State Water Rural Association, and a member of the State of New Hampshire Waste Management Council. Did you ever go home? Now therefore be resolved by the City of Concord that we hereby record our sincere appreciation for the many years of service from Phil Bilodeau to the City of Concord, our esteem for his character. Be it further resolved that we hereby acknowledge that the service and presence of Phil Bilodeau will truly be missed by the City Council, City Administration, the General Services Department, and the entire Concord community. And we extend our best wishes to him in the future. Passed the City Council September 11th, signed by myself. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it could have been twice as long.
Never felt like it. Great job. Thank you. Good job.
Appreciate it.
No words.
Is Matt left, right? I think it's fair to say that what you saw in Officer Nelson and Phil Bilodeau is two just incredibly outstanding professionals that we employ here in the city, and we're extremely lucky to have both of them. So thank you very much, and thank you to your family for lending to us for all these years. Really appreciate it. Right now, that takes us to our consent agenda. There's one item, number 17, that's been removed. Otherwise, the consent agenda is before us. Does anybody have anything else they want to remove? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And the ayes have it. That takes us to our public hearings this evening. Madam Clerk, item 28A, please.
It's an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title II Traffic Code, Chapter 18 Parking, Article 18.1, Stopping, Standing, and Parking, the relocation of 2 bus stops in the Main Street, Pleasant Street area.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Mr. Manager.
Your Honor, members of the council, what this ordinance does, it deletes the current bus stop location at Main and Pleasant intersection. It amends the bus and taxi cab stand ordinance to include bus stops during certain hours, adding that 2 new bus stop locations west of the crosswalk at the South Congregational Church be added, and amending that the currently specific location of both prohibited parking and the location of the parking meters along the section of Pleasant Street is done for the consistency with the items proposed above. The parking committee has reviewed this and endorsed this, subject to bus stop relocations, as well as associated proposed amendments to the ordinance at their August 28, 2017 meeting.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the manager? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Madam Clerk, item 28B, please.
Is an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title II Traffic Code, Chapter 18 Parking, Article 18-1, Stopping, Standing, and Parking, Section 18-1-6, Parking Prohibited at all times in designated places for K Street.
Thank you very much, Ms. Manager.
Members of the council, the parking committee met on August 28 to consider the request to look at the parking on K Street. After conferring with staff, the Parking Committee voted to recommend the City Council approve the attached ordinance eliminating on-street parking on the south side of K Street between North State and View. A map showing the affected area of K Street is attached, and Councilor Kretovic has been talking to the folks out there about this, and I believe you're in favor of this also.
I think the neighbors will speak for themselves.
So I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the manager? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Does anyone wish to testify on this particular item? Sir, ma'am? Yep. Come on up and join us. Grab a seat, relax.
Brandon for us. My name is Jennifer Hall. I own the property at 6K Street. The root cause of this problem appears to be commercial vehicles that have not been properly, have not gone through the variance process, and that forces other vehicles at that property onto the street. It's a rental unit. The owner of that rental unit has posted a sign that says visitors must park on K Street because there is not enough parking for the number of people at that property. That property is located at 404 North State Street. I think the majority of the neighborhood, their concern is it's a safety issue. If there are cars parked on both sides of the street, that prohibits entrance and exit of any emergency vehicles. There's no way that they could pass. For myself, my wife is disabled. She is wheelchair dependent, and we have in the past had to call for emergency services. If there were cars parked on both sides of the street, that would have delayed their response time, and that is my concern for safety. Also, if those other vehicles were properly varianced, that would, I believe, help alleviate the problem. That's all I have. I think there are some other people here that would like to speak as well. Any questions?
Anybody have questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Really appreciate you coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Anyone else would like to share their thoughts on this?
She did a good job.
You summarized for everybody. So, wait, here we go. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening. My name is Robert Waterman. I live at 16K Street, which is east of the area which, if you have the map seen, is not affected in this. I have mixed concerns about this change because I look at it like somebody's polluting the river in front of your house. So you make an ordinance that says don't dump anything in the river there, but then they come and they dump it down the stream. So what happens in this instance, and I think the ordinance is good, and JJ, who was here before us, and the Jackson family who lives next, have a major problem. I mean, there is a car that parks in front of their house on their lawn, and a lot of the neighbors have left notes on the vehicle and asked them not to park there, as you would for your neighbors if you had someone parking on your yard. So it's kind of a lack of respect, and I don't know how you legislate respect. It's one of those things we have a hard time doing today. So my concern is this about the ordinance. I think it's a good idea to not park there. However, in the areas that aren't covered by the ordinance, this individual who's parking and being rude may move his vehicle down someplace else, onto somebody else's lawn. So think about that. It's like kicking the ball down the court. And if we pass this ordinance, then that individual or individuals could go find places on View and K Street to park their vehicles elsewhere and still cause the issue. So it's really not solving the problem as it is. The problem is this individual who is the multi-unit apartment unit owner who is not controlling his tenants and how many vehicles are parked there. They have commercial vehicles, like JJ had said, parked, and there's an overabundance in those vehicles. I'm not familiar with the codes that say how many commercial vehicles can park at a residence, but I think there are codes that don't allow that. So that's not being enforced here. Also, as I believe, you're not supposed to park within 5 feet of someone's driveway, and the parking committee would know that. I think that's not being enforced here. Also, at the intersection of View Street and K Street, which is an intersection, there is also an ordinance that says you can't park so many feet from an intersection, I believe. So I'm not sure if those are being enforced. So if some of those codes or ordinances were enforced here, that might help solve some of the problem. I'm not sure by making a small section of no parking, if this is going to solve the problem, or just kick it down the road to have this individual park further down on K Street, over on View Street, and create a problem someplace else. So that's my concern here, is that this doesn't solve all the problem, just a bit of it. And I have great empathy for my neighbors. I think they have people parking on their lawn. They shouldn't be there. So I'm not against this ordinance because of what they're doing. I sympathize with them and empathize with them, and I don't want that individual parking on their lawns just like they were parking on my lawn. But I'm just afraid that by putting this ordinance into effect, a very small portion, it really doesn't solve the major problem at all, which I think the city parking committee, I'm hoping, could solve this by ticketing this individual who's parking too close to the intersection or too close to other people's driveways.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councilor Schley.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Mr. Waterman. When you talk about a commercial vehicle, could you describe the type of vehicle it is?
Well, there are large pickup trucks, whether 1 ton, 2 tons, with ladders on top of them, and they're larger, like a contractor's type vehicle.
Okay. Are there signs on?
There are signs on the side of the vehicles, yes. The particular vehicle that's been causing the problem is a pickup truck, which is large enough to be a commercial vehicle, but it's not marked as a commercial vehicle. And the thing that's upsetting is, just like you do, you try to be a good neighbor, and you leave a note saying, can you not park here? Because we had to have an emergency to come down in an ambulance for our neighbors, and we're concerned about that. In the past, we've had older people who lived in our neighborhood who have had to have ambulances and fire trucks come down there. And it will create a major health and safety hazard by the parking. It's a small neighborhood, and we all try to do our best to be neighborly. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Critovic.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Waterman, I believe that there are some 4 commercial vehicles at the rental property and then 3 private vehicles for 2 apartments, for two
correct.
adults.
That sounds correct.
There are about 7 vehicles, which is creating the problem.
Yeah, the multifamily unit building is on North State Street, if you can imagine that. And the parking access to that parking lot is off of K Street, so that's why we have the issue on K Street. So really, and like I said, I'm not familiar with how many vehicles can be parked at a unit. There has to be an ordinance that addresses that. So that might be, that is the problem here, really, how many vehicles are parked there and how many vehicles can't have to have access to park someplace else.
Okay. Any further questions? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Anyone else who would like to share their thoughts? Good evening. Welcome.
Hi. My name is Jim Spiegel, and I live on 1 View Street, which is right across from JJ's house, which he was talking about. And a couple of my concerns are, when I'm backing out, is if a car, and I understand if we allow no parking on that side of the street, which would be great, they'll park on my side of the street. But it's a lot easier for me if they did that, because when I back out, there is very little room to get out, if I turn to the right or to the left. Even if they're parked within the boundaries of the 5 feet from the driveway, it's really, really difficult. That's right now. And then when the winter happens, and if there's no parking ban any particular day, we still have the snow piles. It's almost impossible to get out. I mean, there were times where we just didn't leave because we couldn't get by the trucks. And again, these aren't small vehicles. These are major commercial trucks. So I'm concerned about right now, as well as the winter, which is really, really difficult. And so I just wanted to and I understand that, again, it would be great if we had no parking on the street. But my house is one of the only houses on that side before it turns onto, actually onto View Street. So I'm on the corner lot. So chances are they'll be parking right in front of my lawn most of the time, if that's the case. They already do that anyway, and on the lawn itself, because my house would be the next house closest to where they live. So we'll do the best we can, but I know the winter's going to be a real problem if nothing's taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Councilor Nye.
Mr. Spiegel, thank you very much.
Yes, sure.
Have there been any discussions with the actual individuals who are parking the vehicles, not just the property owner that you're aware of?
There have been.
Say no more.
Would you like me to reiterate the
Nope,
discussion?
that's-
Okay, all right, great.
We're on live TV.
Yeah, okay. There have been multiple discussions. In fact, the man who owns the house on the corner of North State and K Street actually put granite or cement pillars at the edge of his driveway because the people, when they were backing out, were backing right onto his lawn to turn around. I think he actually owns most of that driveway anyway and is letting them park there. So he's had many discussions with them, and so have I. Yeah.
Councilor Quincy?
Thank you, Your Honor. Just to help the council orient, Mr. Spiegel's property is on View Street. However, his garage and driveway are on K Street. And so the area he's talking about is his side yard that people are parking on his lawn and blocking his access to K Street in some instances.
Right, so the owner of that house has put signs, as JJ said, no parking or park on K Street only. And they are inching over closer and closer onto our lawn. It's really difficult. So I've had conversations about that as well. Plus, when people come to visit them, as it happens a lot, they'll just pull right onto our lawn. And so I have to go out and explain to them that that's probably not the appropriate thing to do. And they'll say things like, oh, we didn't know. It's like, okay, so there's been some issues.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councilor Schler?
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Mr. Spiegel. Do you know if any of your neighbors have called the police or parking enforcement to see if there's anything that they would be able to do?
I think maybe, yeah, to ticket them if they're parked on the wrong side of the street, sure, yeah. I haven't.
Okay. Thank you.
I've called both. I have as well.
Okay.
My neighbors have.
I like the way you summarize. Councilor Schler?
Thank you. Would it be possible to ask one of the neighbors what the response was when they called?
Person's been ticketed.
Once we're done with this, if they want to come up and share, that'd be great.
I'll gladly share that one as well.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
All
I
right,
appreciate
thank
you
you.
coming tonight.
Thank you.
Anyone else would like to? Welcome. Good evening.
My name is Art Jackson. I live at 12 K Street. I'm not very smart. Last week, my wife asked me to count from 1 to 3, and I missed 2 of the numbers. K Street is a dead-end street. People park right out in front of our lawn, which is a vacant lot at 10 K Street. They park right there, and we have a watering system, and lo and behold, there's a couple of heads right there, and they park very, very close to it, even though we've talked to the people who park there, and then they kind of move it out a little bit. But it's also that vacant lot at 10 is right at as you come down View Street and turn up to K Street to go up, it's right at the end of View Street. And parking there that's within 15 feet of an intersection as well. So I think maybe it would be better if we did have no parking on the south side of K Street, not just to View, but maybe even further. Sir.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Your Honor. I found it curious. You missed one of the numbers. Isn't it true that you were one of Concord High's best math teachers ever?
I was one of Concord High's teachers.
All I have.
I'd like to reiterate what Council was saying the last. Mr. Jackson was my math teacher.
That explains a lot.
Mine as well, but I didn't want to ask him any questions about his
Can we ask him back to see how you did?
No.
Still on the paper.
He's a lawyer, not an engineer.
It's early to be this out of control, that's all I know. All right. Would anybody else like to share? Everybody good? Okay, with that, we'll close the public hearing. And that brings us to item 28C, please.
Jim?
Oh, somebody was
You
coming.
got one more.
Oh, I apologize. You know what? Y'all want to come up? My apologies, I didn't see you. Got these little fangled glasses, I can't really see out of. So. Welcome and good evening.
Good evening.
Roosevelt classes.
You asked how the police department responded. And
Yep.
The first time, they were quite wonderful about it, and the second time was they have a right to park there for 48 hours. And I said, but then they'll move their car after 48 hours for 15 minutes, and then they park it back there again. And they park right on the storm drain. So that's going to be a problem at times. And there's a storm drain right on the other side of the road there too. So it's been just I think our homes are very close there for the most part. We have a little more land, and Jim Spiegel does too, but you know, we don't have the space between our homes. But we do want to be able to park our cars or our company's cars there for a while. I mean, you know, everybody has company, and we all have a problem from time to time too, with kids that come back with a car. So that's all. It's just
Okay, I appreciate it. Would you mind just telling us your name?
Sandra Jackson.
Perfect.
And we've been in our home 50 years, and it's just kind of unsettling not knowing who's around. We've always known everybody coming in the neighborhood and going out, and it's kept it safe through the years. And I think if you go back on your police logs, you'll find out there was probably never a call there. Early.
Gotcha.
So.
Okay, well, thank you for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it. All right. I'm going to try one more time. Anybody else wishes?
You might as well join the party.
Sure.
My name's Deirdre Brotherson. I live at 16 K Street, which is at the dead end next to the Jackson.
You were literally at the very end.
Right, right. I did call the parking office and the police. I never heard anything back from the police, but when I spoke with a woman, and I don't know the name, at the parking office, she told me the regulations were 5 feet from a driveway and 15 feet from an intersection. So the intersection of View Street and K Street's a T intersection. So I'm not exactly sure what 15 feet means, but that's where they park, like right there at the T. So it would seem, I mean, it's just incredibly unsafe, and they've been unresponsive. I've left notes on their windshield, nice notes, not, you know, inflammatory or anything like that, just asking them to please not park there, and have had no response whatsoever, except they continue to park there. So I'm not sure if the, you know, 15 feet, 5 feet regulations would do anything to help. As Mrs. Jackson said, you know, we have people come all the time to visit, 2 older children, 1 18-year-old who has a truck, and so we park on the street. So, you know, having this regulation will be a pain in the neck for us. We'll have to find an alternative. If that's the way it has to be, that's just unfortunate, because, you know, if this one person is affecting a whole bunch of people. But safety does come first, so that's important. So if there's any other way to make it work, that would be nice, because I do think that they'll just find other places to park in the neighborhood. It's not going to solve the problem.
So if you were sitting here,
I'm not.
and I'm listening, and I want
That's
to
why you get the big bucks.
That's right. So, and we want to help. I don't think
Oh, I know. I
any one of us-
understand that.
And I'm uncertain as to.
I'm uncertain too, and I would be, you know, years ago I worked in Lawrence, Massachusetts in housing development, and with multifamily apartments there were always requirements. They could only have they had to have so many parking spaces, and people could only have so many vehicles per unit, et cetera, et cetera. Apparently that doesn't exist in Concord, which is unfortunate, because I think that would solve some of the problems, or that's what my understanding is, that there's no zoning issues or anything like that. And so I don't know if that's the case or not.
Okay. Anyone else? Councilor Schroeder.
Your Honor, I know it's not appropriate to ask a question of the chair now, it should be during the action phase, but I just thought I'd ask it because while these folks are still here, would it be appropriate after we take action on this code change to refer this whole issue of the parking situation on View and K Street back to the parking committee to look at that and see if the vehicles parked there do impede emergency vehicles or could have the possibility of impeding emergency vehicles, and report back to this committee.
So I'm going to turn this into a question. I guess that's really the heart of what I was trying to get at, what Councilor Sherloff said, and that is it better for us to take action and do what is proposed here and then see how it goes? Or would you rather us just simply hold on this and try to find some alternative action, and if it doesn't work, then come back to this? That's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, I mean,
I feel for you.
As we said, and JJ's the one who put this forward, and it doesn't come down to our property as it stands now. It only goes to View Street, so it wouldn't affect us. If the people who live there would like this passed, then I would say go for it. And
thank you.
That would, and then, like you said, see what happens. Cross your fingers. Thank you.
Actually, could you want to do one more question?
I'm not really going to ask a question, Deirdre, but I did want to say that during the action phase, I think more details of the discussion from the parking committee will become available. And I think one of the important elements that Mr. Walsh had recommended was formalizing the parking there so that the individuals in this rental property will actually know where they should be parking appropriately, as opposed to the gray area that's out there today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else like this? Is there anybody left on K Street who's here? Okay, we all set? Everybody good? Okay, with that, we'll now officially close the public hearing. And Madam Clerk, item 28C, please.
It's a resolution authorizing and appropriating the sum of $300,000 from the Conservation Reserve Purchase of Property Fund for the purchase of 2 parcels totaling 116 acres within the Pennacook Lake watershed located off Lakeview Drive and West Parish Road, and improving the acquisition of said open space watershed protection property.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manager.
Members of the council, in 2015, the Holler family agreed to sell property to the city at a cost of $600,000. The appraised value of the property as of October 21st, 2013. Based on this agreement, the Conservation Commission applied for and received grant funding to cover the transaction costs and 50% of the purchase price. The Commission anticipates providing the remainder of the purchase price from the city's Conservation Trust Fund, contingent upon City Council approval. Utilizing funds from the local source water protection program grant, a boundary survey, updated appraisal, and site opinion were completed. The revised appraisal completed in December 2016 indicated the value of the property had increased to $650,000. Despite the increase in the property value, the Holler family has generously agreed to sell the property at the agreed upon price of $600,000. The Conservation Commission voted unanimously at a public hearing on August 9th in favor of the acquisition of the 106 acres, which is 2 parcels of property, allocating no more than the sum of $300,000 from the Conservation Fund. Further, the Commission declared that its purposes in acquiring this property and allocating the funding are to maintain, improve, protect, limit the future use, and otherwise conserve and properly utilize the property as open space together with other land and water resources within the city. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for the manager? Council 9.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Manager, could you comment as to what is the Conservation Commission's intended use of this open space?
First, I don't know if there's anybody here from Conservation Commission. You may want to representative. Beth actually is the staff support to the Conservation Commission.
Good evening and welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Did you hear the question?
Thank you. And I can paraphrase too. Really what I'm wondering about is, I'm supportive of open space acquisition. It's obviously sits right on Pennacook Lake, and I'm wondering what the intended use for the property is.
The intended use is to keep it in conservation, so to protect it there. We haven't evaluated it for timber sales. That may be something that come into play, but it's restricted based on the grants that were received. So it's the Aquatic Resource Mitigation Fund. which requires us for the protection of Lake Pennacook. So it's pretty much for the protection of the water resource is the intended purpose of this conservation land. There's an existing road that runs through the property for the water main. There's potential that that may be a trail connection, but there's no current plans to make any other trail connections on the property at this point in time.
Thank you.
Any further? Councilor Champlin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Fenstermacher, I see that there's a stream indicated on the map that runs through the property. Can you give me a sense of how much of these two lots are wetlands?
There's, it's pretty minimal. It's about 20% of the lot is wetlands. The majority of it is upland, which is the protective upland of the wetlands and the lake.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you very much. Okay, with that, we'll open the public hearing on this item. Anyone wishing to testify to this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. That takes us to 28D, and I would like to ask the consideration of the council if we'd be willing to combine 28D, E, F, G, and H. All of these items pertain to the exact same project, and that is the agreement potentially with Dole Sol Properties, LLC. Is that fine for everybody?
Makes sense.
Okay. With that, Madam Clerk, take a deep breath, maybe a glass of water, and item D through H.
Okay, the first is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a purchase and sale development agreement with Dole Sol Properties concerning the sale and redevelopment of city-owned real estate at 3234 South Main Street and 33 South State Street, known as the former New Hampshire Employment Security property. Next item is an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title IV, Zoning Code, Chapter 28, Zoning Ordinance. Next is an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title IV, Zoning Code, Chapter 29-2, Public Capital Facilities Impact Fees Ordinance, Article 29-2-1-3, Administration, specifically Section G, Incentives for Redevelopment of Blighted, Underutilized, Abandoned, or Contaminated Buildings, and Table 4, City Priority Redevelopment Projects. Then there's a resolution adopting an amended and restated development program and financing plan for the Sears Block Tax Increment Finance District. And last, a resolution appropriating the sum of $300,000 for the demolition of the former New Hampshire Employment Security Building, CIP number 578, within the Sears Block Tax Increment Finance District, and authorizing the issuance of bonds and notes in the amount of up to $300,000.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Mr. Walsh, good evening, welcome, and tell us all we need to know.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the council. Matt Walsh, I'm the Director of Redevelopment, Downtown Services, and Special Projects for the city. Very excited to be before you tonight. This is a piece of property that the city's been working on for quite some years. The council has roughly 100 pages of documents before them, which I will not go through in copious details to talk about, but there are a few points I want to make. First and foremost, I'm pleased to let you know that Drew Dolbin, who's the Executive Vice President of the Dolbin Companies and one of the partners in Dole Sol Properties, is here tonight. He'll speak to you later in the hearing. He's also with John Sokol, who's a partner at Hinckley Allen and has been an attorney for a long time here in Concord. He's also doing a lot of work down in Boston. The items that the clerk read to you will later translate. I'm not going to go reiterate them, but items 35 and 36, those are both items related to the tax increment finance district aspect of the project. And the council won't be able to take action on those this evening because of a provision in state law, RSA 162K, :4, which requires us to wait 15 days after the public hearing. So I just wanted to make sure that was noted for the record. And the staff report that you have is pretty detailed, but going through it quickly, Dole Sol is a consortium of real estate developers and investors. They've been together for a couple of years looking for projects. As I mentioned earlier, Drew Dolbin is a member of that partnership, and he'll speak to you later. Dole Sol plans to acquire the property from the city. We actually have two parcels which total about 3/4 of an acre. Plan to purchase the property from the city for $1,075,000 and construct a new 120,000 square foot mixed-use building. The concepts for that project are on the wall, and that project will contain approximately 109 market rate residential dwelling units, be apartments, probably 2 studios to 2 bedrooms, but they're working through that right now. 5,000 square feet of commercial space on the ground level, South Main Street level of the project, which the development team would very much like to be a restaurant, and they're moving in that direction. And at a minimum of 54 on-site parking spaces. However, that could be increased to as many as 103 if a subterranean parking garage, which the developers are considering, is built at the property. The project altogether will create approximately $12.5 million of new assessed values. The preliminary renderings on the board, I should point out, are very early. They're obviously at a sketch level, and those will evolve as the project moves forward. So they're an indication of what the developer is looking to do, but not necessarily exactly what the developer wants to do. As far as the schedule goes, in the best case scenario, moving as fast as possible, all the pre-development activities would occur over the next year. Construction would start sometime over the next year, probably in the summer or fall, and the project would be completed sometime in late 2019, maybe early 2020. By way of background, the city started discussing the possibility of acquiring the Employment Security project back in 2011. The Employment Security Department had made the city aware that they were going to divest of the property as part of a plan to consolidate offices in central New Hampshire, and the city had the right of first refusal to buy the property. After a lot of discussion and various attempts to partner with other developers to avoid having to buy the property, the city actually took ownership of it on October 31st of 2014, 3 years ago. We plan to hold the property for approximately 5 years. We did that with bond anticipation notes financed by the Sears Block Tax Increment Finance District. Those are interest only and low cost, so those have been relatively inexpensive. The council, after acquiring, or actually even before acquiring the property, set out with the goal of finding a high-density, architecturally appropriate, mixed-use project which would achieve the following: maximize the highest and best use of the real estate, expand the city's tax base, expand the city's employment base, expand the city's supply of market rate housing in the downtown area, build upon success of, at that time, it was the forthcoming Complete Street project. It's now the completed Complete Street project on Main Street. Build upon the investments and successes of the Sears Block TIF district, which had been in place for about a decade. And above all, create vitality. I am very pleased to report to you that the Project Del Sol is planning to do achieves all of those in spades. In addition, Del Sol's project is important to the city because it represents the following. First, it brings another well-respected new developer who's highly experienced and very capable of doing this project to Concord, and they're ready to make a sizable investment in our future. And that's very important. There's nothing wrong with the local developers that are here, but the local developers can only do so much, and it's important to bring in outside developers to keep our economy moving forward and real estate projects moving forward. This project will build upon the successes of the Endicott Hotel, the Remy Block, and the Sacred Heart Church residential projects, and further demonstrate that market rate residential is very viable in our downtown. It helps incentivize other projects to come, things like the Concord Theater, things like Phoenix Hall, and others that are in the works. And very importantly, our return on investment. There's a sheet in here in front of you which I can review quickly in a moment, but our calculation is that in the first 10 years after this project is completed, the return on investment to the city is just under $2 million, and that's not too shabby. The city's responsibilities for this project are detailed in the purchase and sale agreement in the staff report, but here's a quick synopsis. The first one is we need to rezone the property from its current zoning, which is urban commercial, to central business performance. This is needed so Del Sol will have flexibility with setbacks, building heights, impervious coverage, as well as on-site parking requirements. Basically, many of those things go away, and it gives them maximum flexibility to maximize the highest and best use of the site. We're going to rezone the entire block, and there's a drawing in the lower center there on the wall showing what that is. The whole block is about 1.25 acres. The city owns about 3/4 of an acre. Rezoning the other private properties on the block is actually good for those properties. It's going to basically allow those property owners to have greater flexibility on what they do with their property, how they use their properties, and it will make them more desirable should those property owners decide to sell them in the future. The second thing the city needs to do, beyond obviously approving the purchase and sale agreement, is amend our impact fee ordinance. The impact fee amendment in this case, and I realize you have others that are before you tonight that are unrelated to this project, but what you have before you is we'll amend the impact fee ordinance so this project will have a cap of $150,000 in what their impact fee would be. Now, in the staff report, it summarized what the impact fees were projected to be for the project, but that staff report at the time didn't take into account the other changes that are before the council tonight relative to the Concord School District, as well as transportation impact fees for commercial projects. So should the council decide to do away with those, the incentive that the city is really providing here by capping the impact fees at $150,000 is really about a $31,000 incentive to the developer. It's important to note that we've have capped or waived impact fees for other projects that have been done in the city. Those included the Capitol Commons project, the Blue Cross Blue Shield, 2 Pillsbury Street project, as well as the Binder redevelopment, to name a few. After that, the city needs to make amendments to our Sears Block Tax Increment Finance District, the Development Program and Financing Plan, and appropriate $300,000 in TIF-backed bonds to support the removal of the existing building. That building's about 26,000 square feet, and the estimate is about $300,000 to remove that. The TIF has ample capacity to handle that type of investment, and the advisory board for the Sears Block TIF met and recommended those changes to the Development Program and Financing Plan, and also passage of the resolution. The last piece is related to parking, which is probably the most complicated piece of everything, and it's very important. So in the purchase and sale agreement, there's a document called Exhibit 3, which is about 12 pages long, that sets up a framework for the city providing permits to residential tenants of the Del Sol project. And we're going to provide up to 82 permits to the project. However, the actual amount of permits to be provided is going to depend on the final number of apartments that are actually built at the site and the total number of parking spaces the developer provides at the site. So 82 is the ceiling, but it could be less than that. In the agreement, we actually have to enact an ordinance to set up a permit system within 120 days of the city manager signing the purchase and sale agreement. So we're going to say by February of 2018. We're kind of charting, we're charting uncharted territory for the city in a way here by doing this, but it's well worth it. We're envisioning that most of these permit spaces, or hoping they will be in the Store Street garage, but the agreement's flexible and it gives the ability to provide permits for the project in any other parking facility whereby the city decides we're going to allow permits to be issued. We've agreed to provide permits for up to 20 years initially, but there's an option to extend that for another 10 years if certain conditions are met, so it could be a total of 30 years. And again, these are only going to be permits to residential tenants, but we have the ability to expand that to non-residential tenants if we want to, if we have the capacity to do that, and if the ordinance that we mentioned earlier is enacted and allows that. Very importantly, there are no discounts here. So the tenants of this project will pay whatever the market rate is for permits as set by the City Council. That's very important on several levels. And just a minor passing thought here about parking in general. So for the past 4 decades, any major development project that's happened in downtown, the city's been involved in some form, shape, or manner relative to parking. But this agreement is different, and it's important to note that. First and foremost, we're talking about permits here for a common pool of spaces. We're not talking about leases where somebody has a dedicated space that's assigned to them that nobody else can use when they're not using it. And permits are so much more efficient for us to manage, and they allow us to maximize use of the asset without having to build more parking. And parking costs about $30,000 a space to build in a garage these days. So it's good for the public, it's good for the developer's tenants, and it's also good for our economic interests in the long term. Secondly, again, there's no discount that's being provided on whatever the price is going to be for these spaces, and there's flexibility on where they can be provided. And again, all of this is very much in line with the draft recommendations of the strategic parking plan that's going to be coming forward to the council in the next couple months. Lastly, and in closing, the financial details. So as I mentioned, the return on investment for this project to the city in the first 10 years is about $2 million. And you have a handout in front of you that kind of goes through how we come up with that math and some detail below that, which if you have any questions as you digest that later in the evening, I'd be happy to answer that. The other thing that I want to point out to you here is a couple of other things. The $12.5 million of assessed value that could be created, roughly $1,474,000 of that will go directly to the city general fund. It won't be captured by the TIF district. And that's because there's a provision in RSA 162K:10, which requires that when public property is sold to a private developer in a TIF district, the base value of that property at the time gets absorbed by the general fund. So what does that mean? It means over the next 10 years that call it 1.5 million for round numbers, will generate a little over $500,000 in tax revenue in the first 10 years. The city's share of that's about 35%. We'll get about $177,000 for our general fund over the 10 years. The balance of that money will accrue to the school district, the county, and the state. Secondly, there's an attachment to the handout that shows the accomplishments that have occurred in the Sears Block Tax Increment Finance District over the first 10 years that it's really been in existence, 2007 to now. The numbers are impressive. As of September 2017, we've built or renovated 530,700 square feet of building. And with this project and a few others, we're projecting that by 2019-2020, that's going to go up to about 665,000 square feet. To put that in perspective, the Steeplegate Mall in Concord is about 580,000 square feet, so that's significant. The assessed value created, the gross value is about $41.5 million. We're projecting that's going to go up to about $54 million by 2019-2020. The net assessed value, the net new assessed value, I should say, right now it's a little over $38 million, and we're projecting that's going to go to about just under $51 million in the next couple of years. The Tax Increment Finance District has been very successful. It's doing exactly what the City Council put it in place to do, and it's on track to actually eclipse the amount of net new assessed value that was created in the Horseshoe Pond Tax Increment Finance District. So things are going well. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Who has questions? Mr. Walsh. Councilor Slade.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. We spoke earlier, just to clarify from my understanding, that the purchase and sales agreement will be incorporated by reference into the deed. Am I correct in that understanding?
Close, Counselor. So you came in this morning and had a conversation with myself and Solicitor Kennedy about some covenants that are in the purchase and sale agreement, and wanted to make sure that those would carry through. And in the interim, since you and I and Mr. Kennedy spoke this morning, we've talked to Dole Sol's attorney, Mr. Sokol, and we think what we will probably end up doing is taking every covenant that's in the purchase and sale agreement and recording it as part of the deed, so they will run with the land forever. The pieces of the purchase and sale agreement that really aren't germane to those covenants, there's no value in recording it. It just creates confusion maybe in the future. But every piece of that, including that the project is to be market rate apartments, would be incorporated into the deed when the city conveys to Dole Sol. And we won't be conveying the property to the developer until there's a laundry list of things that have to happen first. But in a nutshell, it's basically they have to get their permits and approvals for the project. They have to get their financing for the project. They have to get a building permit for the project. They have to confirm that the project is in budget and that they can go forward and it's going to be financially viable for them. So we're really not going to let the property go until we're basically have absolute assurance that Dole Sol's project is viable and is going to happen.
So the component in the purchase and sales, I'm talking about taxes and pilot, will be part of the deed.
Yep.
The retail restrictions, and then the definition as explained in the purchase and sales regarding market rate apartments will also be part of the deed.
That is our intention, correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Thank you. I thought that was an excellent summary and well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify? Mr. Sink. Good evening, all.
Good evening, Mayor, and members of the City Council. My name is Tim Sink, President of the Greater Concord Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here to speak in favor of this project for a number of reasons. First of all, the current lack of rental housing in Concord is a factor for businesses to recruit talent, particularly young professionals. And so the component of this project that will be 109 rental units ranging from studio to two-bedroom units will go a long way to really help that issue locally. The second reason is that 109 units located in downtown Concord, we've invested a lot of money in our downtown, And this is the fruition of that investment and the furtherance of that investment. So obviously, creating a 24/7 environment in downtown Concord will be very beneficial to the city, and for downtown Concord going forward, it'll be a continuance of that investment and really be an economic shot in the arm for local businesses. The addition of a higher-end restaurant component to this project is very, very attractive. We've been working hard to attract more restaurants, make Concord more of a dining destination, and this will work in favor of that. While this project does not immediately recoup all the initial investment that the city made into the project, as we heard tonight, a close examination of the numbers indicate that short-term investment will pay off very nicely in the long run, and the city will be reimbursed, and the tax base will grow, and this is a very positive issue for the city. So we just think this is a very good project for the city and support this.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Mr. Sink? So, no, thank you very much for coming out tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Who else would like to testify? Sir? Good evening and welcome.
Hello, everybody. I'm Roy Schweiker, and I can give you about 5 reasons why this project is a bad idea. I was here in Concord when the original Sears Block Tax Instrument Financing District was proposed. And my recollection of that when it was proposed is we were going to fix the Sears Block, and then we were going to turn the tax revenue back to the city, so it would go for schools and police and fire and whatnot. But instead, the Tax Instrument Financing District is perpetual, just keeps growing and growing. They spend all the money downtown. Meanwhile, the rest of the city has got to pay for police and fire and schools for all those folks downtown because their money's going into the special district. And that's my big complaint about this. I have tried to find out what a number of school kids in this project is. I asked last week, but of course the city is very slow about giving information to anybody. And they would not come up with a number, what number of school kids per apartment. I tried to find one from a planning commission, and basically, based on the planning commission number, this building will be a net revenue negative forever. It will have more in school kids than what the school taxes would be on it if they were paid. So this thing is not going to be a shot in the arm for the city. It's for the typical resident. It's going to be another money sink because you're going to be paying more in school taxes on this thing than you are ever going to get back from taxes on it. And let's say that 10% of the apartments have kids, and a third of those have 2 kids. You have a 2-bedroom apartment. You might have a single parent with a high school kid. You might have a 20-something couple with a couple of small kids in the other bedroom. I mean, it's not unreasonable that there's going to be kids in this place. And they are going to drag down the perpetually this thing's going to lose money and not make money. The only reason it makes money is that Mr. Walsh is giving all the money to the tax district, and it's the rest of the taxpayers that are going to be paying those school taxes. And that's just not fair. And we need to quit giving downtown all the money it wants to fix itself up and let it pay its fair share of taxes for police and fire and schools. So, he can prove by his numbers that he gets to keep all the money. It shows a profit. I say if you figure out what it's going to cost to pay for the school kids and the other services, it's going to be a perpetual money sink. It's going to lose money. And he gave the examples of what this was supposed to do. It's supposed to be a mixed-use development. So you have this 7-story building, you have 1 restaurant. I mean, I suppose that's mixed use, but it's not what I think of as a mixed use development. It's supposed to create employment. Well, I suppose it's going to take a bunch of people to build it, but how many people is it going to take to run that restaurant, and how much money are they going to get? Are they going to be able to afford to live in those apartments? Probably most of them are going to be part-time. So I don't see it's going to do employment. I don't see it's going to be a real mixed-use development. It's supposed to encourage other development. Well, possibly, more likely it's going to suck up all the parking from downtown. So nobody will want to do another development unless the city subsidizes the garage for them. So there's your money gone again. I mean, every development we've done downtown has been, negative so far because while it nominally increases the tax base, all the money goes to the TIF district, and the rest of the city's got to pay to support the downtown. And that just isn't right. We shouldn't do it. the parking committee, we had a meeting and we talked, and everybody that showed up from the neighborhood said, we do not want parking permits on streets. And I thought it was agreed we weren't going to do it. But the problem is the staff wants parking permits on streets. And in this city, what the staff wants is more important than what the residents want. So, they're going to keep proposing this till you vote it in, so I suppose you might as well just go ahead and do it. But, once again, why are you ignoring the residents and what they want? As far as the price on this, I mean, it's typical for the city. By the time you pay the $300,000 to tear it down, you're going to be getting $700,000, which is half the assessed value, and typically the city sells all its properties at half of what they're worth. But I don't know if anyone here has heard of an outfit called Elm Grove. They just bought some parcels at the corner of State Street and Pleasant Street. They paid $2.4 million for them. Those buildings are much older. They were built in 1880 and 1900. There's less than half an acre and not nearly 3/4 of an acre. And that's only, so they're paying 20% over what the assessed valuation was for that parcel. That's a smaller lot than this, and it's got older buildings. And I think somebody should call up Elm Grove and say, if you're going to pay $2.4 million for that, maybe you'll pay $3.6 million for the DES building. There's no reason whatsoever that we should be selling that thing so cheap when other developers are willing to pay above the assessed value for less desirable property. And that's just, why would you do it? I'm going to not bug you with impact fees now because we have another item on them, and I'll get to it. And the last thing is, this is probably like the most one-sided agreement I've ever seen. Essentially, they can back out of it at any time as they can't find a contractor or something. And I don't know if anybody here remembers when they're tearing down the Sears block, it didn't happen right away. There was piles of junk there because there was a delay in rebuilding it. Anyone remember the Highway Hotel? They were tearing it down. It caught fire. There was piles of junk out there. So I don't think that the city should tear down this building until they have $600,000 in cash from the buyer, non-negotiable. Because why are we tearing down a building that has value to us at our expense if they can then pull out? So we'll be left with this vacant lot that's worth less than it was before when they can pull out on basically any excuse. So is that 5 reasons yet? No, it's only 4 because I'm going to talk about the impact fees later. But, this is not what we need. We do not need to tie up all our downtown parking in one project. We're building something that costs money, that doesn't provide employment, doesn't provide mixed use. So why? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have a question, Mr. Swiger? See none? Thank you very much. Good to see you as always. Anyone else wishing to testify on this item? Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. My name is Drew Dolbin. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Dolbin Company and the Doll of Dolsol Properties. Pleased to be with you here tonight and looking forward to the opportunity to being a new corporate citizen downtown. We've been looking for projects like this throughout New England. I think as Matt put together in the package, we manage about 37 assets in New England, over 70 throughout the East Coast. I'm a 4th-generation son in the family business. We're typically developers and managers and long-term holders. We currently operate property in the city at Pembroke Place and Pennacook Place. We formerly owned and managed units at the Oak Ridge condominium, bought that out of receivership, managed the majority of the units, and then eventually sold them, and they've been returned to condominiums. So we, in New Hampshire at the moment, we're operating just under 2,000 apartments throughout the state. We're currently developing a brand new complex of 256 units at the site of the old Rockingham Park in Salem, New Hampshire. We own units in Lebanon. We own the units here in Concord. So we've been active in the state. We're headquartered in Woburn, Massachusetts. And we think that this particular spot in Concord is an exciting place to create new housing for the city. We think it's going to create a housing opportunity that doesn't exist in this form downtown. What you've done with Main Street to really give it a facelift and make it an exciting place to be with the businesses, putting the utilities underground, creates an opportunity for us basically to fix the one hole in the smile right now. And we think this will create an opportunity for young professionals to live and walk and shop on Main Street. So it's going to be a live, work, play proposal and opportunity. We think it will appeal to move down or occupants who may have a house in town and want a lifestyle change to move to a unit where our professional management takes care of all their needs. So for all of those reasons, we see this as a very exciting spot, and we hope that we will have the opportunity to work together through the process.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony tonight. Does anybody have any questions?
I do, Your Honor.
Mr. Coleman?
Thank you very much. So what was the #1 attraction for your company to look at that site? What really convinced you to make
Well,
this?
its location on Main Street, it makes it a unique opportunity to do something special. And for our company, and we have the opportunity to look at things in a variety of places. My partner, Ari Soliotis, has a significant investment portfolio in New Hampshire and Vermont. And for both of us, we were looking for a signature building that we could have in the state capitol, and this turned out to be, for us, a very good spot for it.
Thank you.
Councilor Champlin and Councilor Slater. Thank you, Your Honor. First of all, welcome back to Concord.
Thank you.
New project. Assuming that the City Council does in fact approve today's resolutions, today's items on the agenda, this is not a question, more of a comment. I would encourage you, since you say that you want this to be a signature building, to in fact think imaginatively, creatively. We have a lot of buildings, that terrific buildings that have been a great asset to the city in terms of development. We don't have a lot of architecture that is kind of outside the box. And I, for one, would love to see something that within the limits of your budget goals, something that really has a wow factor to it.
I'll take that to heart. Thank you.
Councilor Slater.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you for coming tonight. Could you help me to understand a little bit of how you'll go about determining whether you're going to be putting in the 54 parking spaces or you'll be able to go with some additional parking spaces? Now, I'm sure cost is a factor. Are there any other?
I think there are probably three components of the decision-making on that. First would be physically, can they be put on site? At the moment, the site drops almost a full story from State Street to Main Street. So it would appear that there's an opportunity to create at least one level of subterranean garage behind the Main Street frontage retail. And coming to a conclusion whether that physically can be done, we'll need to do some geotechnical work to see whether there's rock there, for example, or any other obstructions. The other is the environmental nature of the soils there is unknown at the moment. Should they be urban brown or in any form or fashion contaminated, there may be a cost in disposing of them in order to create a hole in the ground to put a garage. And then lastly, it will be budget based upon those two factors. Can we economically dig the hole, fill it with concrete and create parking at a number that our residents will hopefully compensate us for doing.
Thank you.
Councilor Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Picking up on the innovation theme, I hope that you at the front end of the project would think deeply about sustainability, environmental issues, solar, green building principles, and all of those kinds of things that would make state-of-the-art building in that respect as well.
Well, that's something that we look at on every project that we do. We're depending on where and when. Sometimes we're more successful than others, but I don't believe you can build a building today and not have that at the forefront of your mind. It's what responsible building's about.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, thank you again. We really appreciate you coming and looking forward to success. With that, is there anyone else who wishes to testify? Okay, before I close the public hearing, I'll just note for the record that we all did receive a email this afternoon from Stephen Dupree regarding this particular item. With that, we will close the public hearing. And Madam Clerk, that what brings us to item 28I, please.
It's a resolution appropriating the sum of $160,000 for improvements to the Store Street Municipal Parking Garage, CIP number 529, with the Sears Block Tax Increment Finance District and authorizing the issuance of bonds and notes in the amount of up to $160,000.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manager.
And Mr. Walsh again.
Well, you should be up here already then.
Apologies, Your Honor.
Yeah, 21 hearings ago.
Yes, we do. So before you tonight, as the clerk said, you have a request for an appropriation of $160,000 to make some repairs to the Store Street parking garage, also known as the Capitol Commons garage. Essentially, these would be supported by the Sears Block Tax Increment Finance District. The district has ample capacity to float this bond, which would cost us, we're projecting it's a 10-year note, would cost us a little over, just under $191,000 over the 10 years. It's included in the development program and financing plan that was recommended to you by the Sears Block TIF Advisory Board, which we talked about as part of the Del Sol project. Essentially, what we're going to be doing is making some repairs and retrofits to the elevator tower, which the roof is got some issues with leakage, and we need to take care of that. It's one of the reasons why the elevator's been unreliable. The second is we're going to be essentially rebuilding the entryway into Red River Theater. The entryway is a little unique, so you come down through the plaza, you go down the steps into the vestibule. That vestibule is actually owned by the city of Concord, and it's part of the parking garage. You just go through the second set of doors into the office building where the theater is, and that's obviously owned by Michael Simchek and Red River's a tenant. So we're going to be reconstructing that to deal with some waterproofing issues that we've had ever since over the last few years, and hopefully making it so we don't have that problem anymore. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. Any questions for this item? Seeing none, thank you very much. Thank you. Anyone wishing to testify on this item? Good evening and welcome.
Hi, good evening. Good evening, councilors. I'm Angie Lane. I'm the executive director of Red River Theaters, and I just wanted to make a few comments in support of the improvements, specifically when it comes to the door, the entrance, when you come down the steps into the vestibule. The water damage has created quite an obstacle for, especially with people that might have some ability issues, and we have a older set that sometimes can find those doors quite troubling. Some people have even commented thinking it was locked, and a lot of people use that as a gateway to get to South Main Street, whether they're coming to the theater or not. And then specifically for the elevator, again, it's an accessibility issue. We have a lot of people that might have walkers or just use the elevator as a way not to use the stairs because it's too dangerous for them. And so the elevator, having it break down almost on a regular basis is quite an obstacle for our guests, but also just for people who are entering Main Street because it's truly a gateway. People coming from the garage, whether or not they're coming there for the first time or not, that first trying to get out of the doors or into the doors can be a bit of an issue. But that's all I wanted to say, but thank you so much for supporting downtown and the revitalization. I, for one, am enjoying it, so thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? See that. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anybody else? Welcome back.
Hello, I'm still Roy Schweiker, and Mr. Walsh is up to the same trick. He's saying, okay, we have all this money from downtown, so let's spend it on a garage instead of spending it on police and fire and schools and not. I mean, this TIF district was supposed to expire, but now we're using it to pay for the garage. It seems to me like if the garage cannot be paid for out of parking fees, we should close it and get rid of it. And I'm going to not bother testifying on the other garage because I have the same opinion of that we do not use TIF money to subsidize this garage. We need to raise the parking fees to the point it'll pay for it. And the good news is we can put the spaces in the garage and give them to this gentleman here and just charge enough to pay the renovation fees and everything else because he wants those permits, so we'll give them to him and charge him what it's going to cost to fix the garage. And I don't understand why you expect people that live in the rest of the city to pay for the garage instead of the people that actually use it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Swigger? Seeing none. Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, close public hearing. Madam Clerk, item 28J, please.
A resolution appropriating $60,000, including authorizing the issuance of bonds and notes in the amount of $60,000, as the local agency match for the replacement of Concord area transit bus vehicles. CIP 584.
Thank you. Before we go on, I just want to note for the record, item 28I, that also won't be voted on until November because RSA 162:-K:4 says it has to be 15 days after a public hearing. Is that correct, Mr. Walsh?
That is correct, Your Honor.
All right. So just for the record, that we won't be voting on that one either. So that takes us 28J, Mr. Manager.
Your Honor, members of the council, in 2016, the Engineering Services Division introduced a multi-year capital improvement program item to provide local agency match for the replacement of the transit bus vehicles. The capital improvement program work plan included a replacement of bus vehicles in 2016, 2017, and 2018. Due to delays in the federal and state grant funding, the federal grant authority at the state level was not available until 2017. In the past year, the Hampshire Department of Transportation and the Federal Transportation Agency Administration, developed a replacement transit vehicle specifications with Concord area transit and a purchase order for the acquisition of 2 transit vehicles, which was approved on June 27th. The third vehicle will be replaced in a subsequent grant round to follow this action. Therefore, it's recommended the City Council accept this report and approve the resolution appropriating the $60,000, including authorization of issues of bonds and notes. So if you go back and look at your capital budget, all of those items were approved by you as part of the budget. The request just never came forward for those funds because the federal and the state government hadn't been able to done their piece of it yet. So I recommend approval of these 2 buses at this time.
Thank you. Any questions for the manager? Councilor Hirschler.
Thank you, Your Honor. Are these the smaller buses that had been talked about, or are these going to be the full-size buses that we see in the city now?
They're slightly smaller than they're smaller than what's out there now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Anybody else? Okay. At this time, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify on buses? Come on up.
Hello again, everybody. Several years ago in the budget hearings, there was something said about soon the city would be authorized to run its own bus program and wouldn't have to go through CAP to do it. And once again, I asked last week if this was true now, and no one will answer my question, so I don't know the answer to that. But I think that we're paying a lot of money for a crummy bus system. I think we need to do something about it. I think you should table this request because you may not need these buses. When I was in college, and that was like 50 years ago, can you believe it? They were talking about the future of urban transit was what they called computer-aided transit, because they just had these computers coming out, that could actually figure things. And so instead of having all the buses run on the same routes, you would call in where you lived and where you wanted to go, and they would have this fleet of vehicles, and the nearest vehicle would pick you up and take you there and maybe pick up other people along the way and drop off other people. And, a computer was smart and it could do that. And, good gracious, now there's probably a better computer in your phone than the one they were using to route these vehicles back then. And it was a big Department of Transportation project. They had all these grants. And it's been figured out, Mr. Lemieux isn't here, but what we're paying for these city buses now, you could buy everybody a taxi ride for less money. They could start where they wanted, go where they wanted to. Hey, they could come to city council meetings at night because, right now you can't do that on the bus, weekends, whatever. So if we went to a dial-a-ride system in the city, we could get better service for less money. And why are we buying these people these buses if we could take our own grant money and do it? The other thing we could do is just about every public transit in the state is regional. We're about the only one that only has lines in our city. I mean, I've talked to people, wouldn't it be nice to have a line up to the county home in Bosco? So if you knew somebody up there, you could take a ride up and see them, or if they wanted to come into Concord to see you, they could do it, because a lot of the people up there don't have cars, and a lot of the people who might want to visit them may not have cars. And we have CAP at giving these tents and sleeping bags to homeless people so they can go camp out, and there's no campgrounds in the city. Why don't they run a line out to Hopkinton as a campground so these people can actually camp out legally if they're given them the tents and sleeping bags? If CAP wants to run the system, we shouldn't be paying the whole thing. It should be a regional system. These other communities should pay, and we should be able to travel far. The Manchester buses, they come to Concord, they go to Hooksett, they go to Nashua. You can go all over on a Manchester bus. If CAP wants to run it, they've got to go regional, and we shouldn't give them their buses until they either agree to do it or we take it over and make it a dial-a-ride system. Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Swiker? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to testify on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Madam Clerk, item 28K.
Is an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title I, General Code, Chapter 15, Licensing and Regulation of Businesses, Trades, and Occupations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manager.
Mr. Bahia will be taking over the show for the next 4 or 5 items, so he'll...
Yes, he's a little slow to get up there, too. I'm trying my best. I'm older than Matt, so it takes me longer.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of council. I do have several items this evening, so I hope you will bear with me. The first item this evening for your attention is regarding licensing. This ordinance amendment continues the city's efforts to streamline our business regulations. What's before you eliminates the code licensing requirement for amusement centers, also known as arcades, for amusement devices, bowling alleys, billiard parlors, convalescent homes, and dances. In terms of convalescent homes, just want to lay anyone's concerns. They're highly regulated today by the state, by different fire services, so there's no safety issue with this change this evening. And in terms of dances, every time I read the ordinance, I just thought of Footloose, the movie. It seemed like there was this very big reaction to dances in the 1980s. Section after section, the ordinance is being proposed to be excised.
So we can dance for free now.
You can dance for free. I get Footloose and go to it. Yep.
Now that Mr. Walsh is no longer a young professional, we probably don't have to worry.
That's probably true. Probably true. The second portion of the ordinance is actually a recommendation from the Ad Hoc Events Committee. There's 3 parts to it. The first element is really to help our downtown special events. It proposes providing the code office with sole authority to issue special event permits for Eagle and Bicentennial Squares. So what happens today is if you want to do a special event, use either of those squares, you actually have to go to the code office, fill out an application, pay a fee. Then you have to drive across town, go to the Parks Department, fill out an application, and pay another fee. It doesn't make any sense. It was recognized at our lean event, which is part of this whole process to overhaul our licenses. And it's supported, this change is supported by our Parks and Rec Department, as well as our code office. The second and third items are somewhat closely related, and they're also related to special events. It's to authorize the city manager to approve street closures related to special events, as well as to authorize the manager to issue permits for the consumption of alcohol on city streets as part of a licensed event. So what happens is if you've ever had to coordinate a special event, you know there's lots of moving parts. There are performers, there's vendors, there's volunteers, but usually the most important part is figuring out if you actually have a venue. So are you going to be able to use a street, for example? And if you actually can also do, for example, a beer tent, which is a large piece of fundraising for a lot of these events. Today, under our current system, because the council typically only meets once a month, there are, depending on when you apply, there might be an instance where you have to wait 4 weeks to get resolution to those 2 basic questions. So that was raised quite a bit during our lean event by some of the promoters that have done historically events in our community. So the ad hoc committee recognized that and has recommended that as well. Be happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Bahia? Seeing none, thank you very much. At this time, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify on this item? Anyone? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Madam Clerk, item 28L, please.
Is an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title IV Zoning Code, Chapter 2894, Decisions by the Planning Board, Site Plan Review. Projects exempt from site plan review.
Mr. Bahia.
Your Honor, members of council, today the city in our central business performance zoning districts, which comprise most of our downtown as well as down Pennacook, it's the most flexible zoning district we have in our community, and Mr. Walsh alluded to that earlier. There aren't requirements, for example, for parking or for setbacks, and the goal, I would imagine, was to incentivize the reuse of the historic inventory that we've got in our downtowns. And with the success of the Main Street project, we're seeing more residential projects coming online, such as the Dole Sol project considered this evening. But under today's zoning, if a project creates 3 or more residential units and it's not doing any other work for example, no other work to the exterior, no parking lot improvements, nothing like that, it still triggers a full site plan review with the planning board. And in fact, if it creates 5 or more units, it triggers a major site plan review, which is a 2-month process. So what that means, besides the time that it takes to go through that process, it means that a developer would have to hire a surveyor or an engineer, pay for those costs, create a full set of plans, submit it to the planning board, go through the process, and then ultimately the planning board receives a site plan, which really doesn't do anything because there's nothing in the site that's being done. It is something that really staff finds to be unnecessary and a costly obstacle to redevelopment. Hence the proposed amendment before you this evening. And what's being proposed is basically, look, if a project doesn't trip any other site plan thresholds, and it's just building residential units in an existing building in the Central Business Performance District, it wouldn't require planning board action. It would qualify for waiver. The planning board reviewed this at last month's meeting, and they unanimously recommended approval. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Bayou? Seeing none, thank you very much. Start there. Anyone wishing to testify on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Would anybody be opposed if we held item 28M and 28N together, both dealing with impact fees?
Sure, that's fine.
Is that okay, everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Madam Clerk.
The first is an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title IV Zoning Code, Chapter 29, 1-2B1 is Public Capital Facilities Impact Fee Ordinance Assessment and Collection, the computation of the amount of impact fees. The second is an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title IV Zoning Code, Chapter 29, 2-1-2E, Public Capital Facilities Impact Fees, Assessment and Collection relative to waivers.
Mr. Bayou.
Your Honor, members of council, as you know, the impact fee ordinance was adopted in 2001. At the time, we had a much stronger local development economy, and the fee was seen as a means really to obtain funds for capacity projects for roads, bridges, parks, and schools. One thing to keep in mind is that a project may still pay, for example, a transportation impact fee or a traffic impact fee, it's also known as, and the planning board can also still require that that same project also make off-site improvements which may be traffic related. So just an example, it could be, for example, like a Lowe's on Fort Eddy Road. I imagine they probably paid a substantial impact fee, and then they were also responsible for making improvements to the roadway there in front there. I imagine signals, things like that. Predated me, but that's the type of practice that we currently have. In terms of some of the changes the council has made to the impact fee ordinance, is recognize that there have been some shortcomings. So the council, for example, eliminated impact fees on home additions and finished basements. As you all recall, that was probably the most consistent complaint that we received prior to that change. The council also, in an effort to incentivize market rate housing downtown, both in Concord and Pennacook, created a waiver for market rate housing in existing buildings in those districts. Council also eliminated the change of use impact fee. If you'll recall, when ground floor retail, or excuse me, ground floor commercial would change in downtown Concord, there was an impact fee typically associated with that change, and so it was just thousands of dollars that small merchants would have to pay. So that was also altered. And then also in 2014, the council zeroed out the Merrimack Valley School impact fee. When we looked at impact fees, we basically put this in the context of what are our competitors doing. When I say our competitors, we all know this state is driven by property tax, and so business expansion, business retention is very important to our communities. We looked at cities that typically we are contending with for those types of businesses. So for example, the city of Portsmouth, they do have an impact fee ordinance, however, they've never assessed impact fees. The city of Manchester, as well as the city of Nashua, do assess impact fees, but they do not charge anything for non-residential development. So in one way, you could see that as sort of a backward way of incentivizing non-residential commercial growth. The city of Dover, as you will have noted in the report, does assess impact fees across the board. However, their index of fees is much less than the city of Concord's. And the town of Salem, coincidentally, they assess impact fees across the board as well, but coincidentally, their town council apparently is looking at reducing or eliminating impact fees because we were contacted by their planning department recently as we were doing our own analysis. Within that context, FPAC recently looked at the impact fee structure, and they concluded that Concord, with our current system, really is at a competitive disadvantage. And I say that because we also have to premise it on the fact that geographically, we're still at somewhat of a disadvantage. Council's done an outstanding job with making some economic development changes, such as hiring Susie Pegg. I think we're going to see a lot of perception changes. But today, what we've noticed in our business visits is that CEOs will tell you it's still a struggle to get customers to come beyond the Hooksett tolls, or employees, for example. They're still sort of attracted to that radius around Boston and southern New Hampshire. So we need to be more creative in what we do to attract economic development. And the FPAC concluded that more long-term growth could probably be achieved by sustained tax-based growth versus looking at impact fees. Case in point, there is an example in the report that cites a 14,000 square foot retail development. That development never came to fruition. It was proposed for Triangle Park Drive. To give you an idea of scale, 14,000 square feet is about less than half the size of the Chipotle development across from the mall. And that development would have had to pay in Concord a $63,000 impact fee for traffic alone. Once the developer received that $63,000 estimate, they walked away from the project because in light of all the other project costs, it just didn't make sense. So in that instance, not only do you not get the fee, but you also don't get any tax-based growth. FPAC recommended unanimously that the City Council consider a waiver of impact fees on non-residential development, and that recommendation was also supported by the Planning Board. You'll also see in your ordinance that there's some additional housekeeping language changes to the ordinance. When we looked at it, we felt that there was some historical language in there that needed to be clarified. And the second item on for your public hearing this evening is actually a zeroing out of the Concord school impact fees. As I mentioned earlier, the council in 2014 zeroed out Merrimack Valley when that school district paid off its bond related to their new school construction. Well, Concord still had a legacy bond related to the high school expansion from the 1990s, and that bond was paid off in fiscal year 17. There's a letter actually from the business administrator for the district that confirms that. So based upon that, we don't have a legal basis to continue collecting the fee. In fact, we've been refunding fees. Anyone that's paid a fee since July 1, 2017 onward, we've refunded. So that's what you have before you.
Thank you much. Any questions, Mr. Bayer? Councilor Schluter.
Thank you, Mr. Bayer. I'm wondering why the applicant would, for a non-residential project, would have to apply for a waiver, why those wouldn't be, why we just wouldn't remove those impact fees altogether.
So in our discussion with FPAC, there was a concern about making sure that we didn't eliminate the impact fee ordinance because if times change, the economy changes, whatever factors might change, they wanted to have that ability, and they specifically said, let's make it a waiver. The way it's structured today, in essence, becomes almost an automatic waiver. There's no application process that we're considering. It would just be if you're doing non-residential, then you qualify for a waiver.
So, if I may, thank you, Your Honor. An applicant may request from the clerk a full or partial waiver of the school facilities impact fee for the development of senior housing. So, I guess who would they go before in order to, who would make that determination if the waiver should be or shouldn't be accepted?
So
what would that
I believe you were citing a separate part of the ordinance. The part of the ordinance that's specific to this actually has some waiver language that's a little bit more automatic than that. It's not specifically calling out an active request. So the way it's drafted, we would not contemplate that there'd have to be a request before the planning board or the city planner, for example. It would qualify when you for example, if you go through the planning board process, you would just not be assessed an impact fee because obviously it'd be clear as to you're doing non-residential development or whatever you might be doing.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. This time, anyone who wishes to testify on any one of these impact fee ordinance changes? Good evening, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's been a while.
Looks like retirement's treating you well.
Hello, members of the council. Yeah. I'm speaking largely in favor of the modifications to the impact fee ordinances. To step back a little bit and take a minute, the city manager at the time, Jim Smith, in 1987, started making a condition of planning board approval that impact fees be charged for traffic and Recreation Services. So we went almost 14 years before we were able to regularize it into an ordinance, and that dramatically reduced the administrative cost and time and effort and uncertainty. Jim is, I think, the only, Mayor Boulay is the only member, I think, who the council was present for the 2001 a series of public hearings. Well, irregardless of how we got here today, that if you look at the literature on impact fees across the country, our rate of growth really doesn't normally warrant the assessment of impact fees. And I'm trying to think of a kind words to say about the state tax situation, but it's because of the way the state requires towns to finance road improvements that we actually got into the impact fee business. I can't think of any other state in America where they require a town or city to utilize their property taxes to pay to improve a state highway, let alone a highway on the national highway system. And that's what happens in New Hampshire. So in that sense, I think we're in a position where we could seriously consider, I think you should act to reserve, and like I said, like our Carlos said, is reserve the ability to charge impact fees later, but basically zero them out. I would say with the exception of one type of development for non-residential, and that is tax-exempt properties. Because they do not pay anything. They do not add to the tax base. They do not directly, anyway, contribute to the operations of the government within the state of New Hampshire as well as the city. One way that could be done is, for example, is to simply record a stipulation, record a document, a legal document, with each approval that says if that impact fees would be due, say, in the next 10-year period, if for some reason the property was made tax exempt. And one exception to that would be, of course, if someone offered a fee in lieu of. So that was the modification. You could either require, since you're collecting impact fees now at CO, you could either do it through a recorded agreement, or you could get even a financial guarantee in the form of a bond or letter of credit. And I would think the agreement would be easier, and you could set up the agreement so that it automatically expired. It didn't require any further action by either the applicant, the then owner, or the city to eliminate that. It would effectively be a lien. And then if it was converted to a nonprofit, it would be subject to that one-time fee for that traffic. And that was my only suggestion to you. I think what's been proposed is reasonable, particularly in the New Hampshire situation. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak, and hope to see you again sometime in the future. Thank you.
Anybody have a question? Councilor Schlick.
Thank you, Mr. Henninger. It's nice to see you again.
Okay.
So out on exit 17, there's potential with additional development that it will require approximately, the number that we hear, $2.5 million worth of road improvements. If there's no, and I tend to agree with the position you've taken, but if there's no impact fees, and the city has to make those improvements, if the state isn't willing to contribute to that, do you have any thoughts on how you move forward so that it's affordable for the developer and affordable for the city?
Well, let me put it, let's take an example. Concord Regional Healthcare Corporation. They worked out an agreement with the city for the conveyance of the right-of-way for the Pleasant Street and for the bypass, that they would be exempt from impact fees. But subsequently, they contributed $2.5 million in matching funds to build the southerly lake. The calculated impact fees for that project would have been only a few $100,000. Also, there's a lot of opportunity for there. Second of all, I won't be speaking longer, is that the planning board still has the authority to do exactions. And they can require off-site improvements that are substantially related to the project in question. But I have to say, at any major project like that, the city has always had to make a contribution towards that, whether it's a direct TIF or a pseudo-TIF. By pseudo-TIF was, we evaluated what we would get from tax revenue, took out the cost. This will pay for itself if you do it. And there was actually an agreement with Steeplegate Mall that they would be assessed at a certain value for 5 years. And they more than exceeded that, and it paid for the cost of the bonds that were associated with the off-site road improvement.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Good to see you. Anyone else wishing to testify on this item?
Well, I agree with Mr. Henninger that it's very unfortunate the way the state makes ordinary people in Concord pay more for education and roads and whatnot than in other states. But I don't think the solution is to say, okay, we'll let the ordinary people pay for it and give the developers a free pass. I mean, if there was a project, there was a multi-million-dollar project, and the developer didn't build it because of $63,000 in impact fees, maybe that wasn't such a good project to begin with. I think that we need to consider some things like, I don't know why the schools only collect impact fees when they have bonds, whereas the city apparently collects impact fees in advance of improvements, then makes them. I don't know if anyone's read about they're going to build a new runlet, $400 a year for all the taxpayers, except this is the school board, that's the estimate, it'll probably be $800. Don't you think it would be nice if we started collecting impact fees for runlet before they build it, so we'll have a fund that could go towards it? I mean, is that legal? Can we do it? But if we can, instead of zeroing out the school impact fees in Concord, I'd increase them, because you know that's going to happen. They got to do something there. Why aren't we banking some money to do it, and why aren't we letting the people that are going to benefit from it pay? And as far as this other stuff, well, let's take Lowe's. Is Lowe's going to locate in Nashua or Portsmouth instead of Concord because their impact fees are too high? You can drive to Nashua or Portsmouth to buy building supplies? Of course you aren't. Lowe's will build in Concord if it makes sense for them to do it. And if it doesn't make sense for them to build a road to their place, why should we expect ordinary people to build a road to their place when they aren't necessarily ever going to buy building supplies? I think it's reasonable to let the companies that need something built to make their project work have to pay at least part of it. I'd like to see an impact fee for that downtown improvement. Let the people that wanted the power lines be buried, divide it up, charge it to the properties that are going to benefit from burying the power lines. I don't see why people that are nowhere near downtown should be paying for that. What benefit do they get? Why not let the people pay through the impact fee? And as far as letting these folks give their impact fees, sure, let's charge them their percentage of the burying of power lines if it's such a good thing, in addition to whatever else they're going to do. I don't see, once again, they're going to build this $12 million project, and they expect ordinary homeowners to give them money. I think it should be the other way around. Let's let them, when they're going to stick the homeowners for a bill for all those school kids for the remaining centuries, at least let them pay up front in their impact fees, and keep the school impact fee, make the developers that need traffic improvements and whatnot pay for them instead of charging that to the rest of the taxpayers, and let the DES people pay an impact fee. If they need the stuff, let them pay for it. Thank you.
Any questions? See none. Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to testify on this item? Okay, with that, we'll close the public hearing. So I'm going to make an executive decision. Hope you all don't mind. It looked like the last remaining public hearings are all kind of internal type things. And since I think the folks from K Street have waited long enough, would anybody object to going back and taking action on the ones we've already heard? No. Folks in K Street at home? All right, so Madam Clerk, if you could read item 29, please.
It's an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title II Traffic Code, Chapter 18 Parking, Article 18-1, Stopping, Standing, and Parking, the relocation of 2 bus stops, Main Street and Pleasant Street.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second. Motion made, second to approve this item. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Say no. The ayes have it. Item 29 is approved. Madam Clerk, item 30, please.
An ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title II Traffic Code, Chapter 18 Parking, Article 18-1, Stopping, Standing, and Parking, Section 18-1-6, Parking Prohibited at all times in designated places, Schedule I, K Street.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made and second to approve this item. Is there any discussion? Councilor Credit.
Thanks, Your Honor. A couple of months ago, several of the neighbors reached out with regards to what's happening on K Street. This is a lot more contentious than what they came up and testified today. Fortunately, there's, as you heard them say, there's one person over and over again that seems to be the person that's parking on the street and being the most impactful. This individual has received several tickets from the police department. And I am sympathetic to him because he is a single father that lives in one of the apartments. And he is contributing to the problem because he does have his own commercial vehicle. He's a painter by trade that he parks out on the street. The way that this house is configured, they have a 3-car garage and 2 of the garage spaces are taken up with construction equipment by the other renter. The other renter is the one that has 4 commercial vehicles on the property, as well as the residential cars for them. When they have visitors that are over, there are cars lined up and down the street. And the neighbors have gotten to the point where they have tried to reach out to the renters. The owner of the property that rents to these people lives in Oklahoma. They're not getting any restitution. Some of the residents will sit out there and just mock the residents that live on K Street. It's become intimidating, it's become volatile, and the neighborhood needs some resolution. So I have spoken to the one individual that's been impacted the greatest. And he is very sympathetic to what's going on in the neighborhood, but he's also on edge here. He's a young guy raising his kid, and he's getting fine after fine after fine because he's parked too close to a street, he's parked too close to a driveway, he's parked on someone's lawn. It goes on and on and on. The police asked him to park across from View Street so it wouldn't be impactful to people's driveways in this time period that we have now from when we've had this discussion with the parking committee to where we are today. When the parking committee looked at this, they really thought it would be important to eliminate the parking on the south side, but to formalize the parking, draw some lines on the north side so this guy has a place to park. And I believe that what they thought is that there might be actually 4 parking spaces that they could gain. The person that will be most impacted by that is Mr. Spiegel because he has the largest grass area that is there, but at least there will be lines that say, park here. Unfortunately, the young man that lived there has not returned my calls since the conversations that I had with the parking committee, but he was, at the time, grateful that at least someone is stepping in and saying, please help me, listen to my voice. The neighbors are struggling here, and I think that the best interest of the city is to listen to this neighborhood, try and formalize something here so that we can get some peace. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councilor Nine.
Thank you, Your Honor. I am willing to certainly vote and support this. I made the motion, anything we can do to help the neighborhood. I'm concerned that, as Mr., I think it was Waterman spoke, it's not going to fix the problem. It's just going to push it somewhere else down the road, across the street, down on View Street, and I don't know how we address that. I think the mayor referenced, do we send it back to the committee for further study? Are there other options for, issuing permits to the residents of the street that only certain individuals can park on the street? Do we, look at some other alternative of restricting commercial vehicles from on the street from parking? I don't have the answer. I'm willing to try something in the interim, but I'm wondering if there are any other options available there. So,
thank you.
Wait to hear what anybody else has to say.
Let's go.
Thank you, Your Honor. I certainly understand your concern about shifting the problems and the issues potentially to other parts of the area. And it may or may not happen, but I really feel very strongly about passing this tonight. And this is a step to get it done, because if we kick it back to the parking committee, which is
run by a fabulous committee. I mean, it really is outstanding people on in handsome, and thank you. But what's going to happen, it could be literally months before we come back and for we hope, something to resolve this. And we're talking about months, it'll probably be, I don't know, next spring or something. So there's snow conditions, all sorts of things going on. So at least that's why I strongly urge that we vote on this tonight for what's proposed. And then we can still work it, doesn't mean it's over, but at least we're doing something. So that's why I'm supporting and voting for this.
Anyone else? Councilor Verschlag and then Councilor Shrill.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think a question for the manager. First, I should say I'm going to support the neighbor's request here. Could the manager help me refresh my memory what we define as a commercial vehicle? Because we had an issue in my neighborhood a few weeks ago, a month ago, where a tractor trailer was parking in the neighborhood, and so my understanding, how do we define commercial vehicle? Because they're not allowed to park without your permission overnight.
I do not have the definition.
Okay, I can't find it in the, I don't know if anybody from staff.
Maybe you may have, no, we don't have that.
Mr. Kennedy, do you have that?
I don't have that available.
Our city solicitor does not have that. We do not have an answer to your
Come
question.
back at the next meeting.
And then just a follow-up, if I may, more of a comment. I think this points to the importance of having an active POP patrol, problem-oriented policing. I think this is an issue that by having the same group of officers coming back in and dealing with the neighbors, there would be more of an opportunity to find an amicable resolution. By not having that patrol, not through any fault of the police department, just because of a staffing issue and the level of calls that we have, you wind up having a different officer coming each time, and the whole issue starts over and over and over again each time. So hopefully, I'll put my plug in for, we'll see the POP Patrol reactivated at some time very soon. Thank you.
Just to address the policing issue, I don't think it's an issue whether we want to redo it or when it's done, but we have a shortage in staffing.
No,
I think the
I
issues are
stated that.
way beyond this issue. We've got to get to the heart of the staffing issues. And nobody is more supportive of that than the chief and part of the administration.
No, if I didn't make it clear, I'm sorry, if I didn't make it clear, I did state that I understand there's a staffing shortage.
I heard you, just re-emphasizing. Councilor Ehrlich.
Thank you, Ron. I want to commend our Ward 3 Councilor, Councilor Kretovic, for all her activities on behalf of the neighborhood and trying to find a solution to the problem, and also the comments of Councilor Nyan and Councilor Cohen about the parking committee. We're very fortunate in Concord to have an excellent traffic engineer. Could this be referred to the traffic engineer to see if he has any recommendations to help resolve some of the issues the neighbors are facing?
The answer is sure. What I took away from the motion was simply to adopt this portion here. Based on discussion, I assumed, but I'm glad you're stating it for the record, that this will go back to the parking committee, like the parking committee chair stated. They would continue to work with this, continue to work with the residents in the neighborhood, continue to work with the ward councilor, and hopefully find further resolution for the street and the residents. Is that the way everybody else pretty much understood it?
I did, Your Honor, but I know Councilor Cohen made a very good point about the length of time before the committee could actually meet and act on some of these issues. In the interim, I thought maybe our traffic engineer, Rob Mack, could look at this situation and may have some ideas that we haven't thought of.
So would the person who made the motion and the person who seconded be willing to amend their motion to allow for it to also be referred to our traffic engineer?
Yes.
And who seconded?
Everybody.
Okay, everybody feel good about that?
Yeah.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
Point of clarification. So we would go forward, the amendment, the proposal is to go forward with this.
Correct.
And then have them look at that.
Just look at the whole situation in that neighborhood.
Everybody clear about that?
Yes.
Can I ask, thank you, Your
No,
Honor.
dude.
So,
Council 36.
if this were to pass, I don't assume that the people at the residence are going to be getting rid of any of their vehicles. So where do we expect that they would be parking?
There is plenty of parking on site. It is about where they can block the driveway that the landlord is limiting where people can park and telling specifically this one renter that he has to park on K Street.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we all set for the question? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Motion is adopted. Item 31, please.
A resolution authorizing and appropriating the sum of $300,000 from the Conservation Reserve Purchase of Property Fund for the purchase of 2 parcels totaling 116 acres within the Pennacook Lake watershed located off Lakeview Drive and West Parish Road, and approving the acquisition of said open space watershed protection property.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve this item. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, ready for the question? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Have received the necessary 2/3. Motion is adopted. Madam Clerk, item 32, please.
Resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a purchase and sale development agreement with Jasol Properties concerning the sale and redevelopment of city-owned real estate at 32 through 34 South Main Street and 33 South State Street, known as the former New Hampshire Employment Security property.
Thank you very much.
Approval.
Second.
Made and seconded to approve this, this item. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, ready for the question? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Welcome. Item 33, please.
An ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title 4 Zoning Code, Chapter 28 Zoning Ordinance.
Move approval.
Second. Motion made and seconded to approve this item. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, ready for the question? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Madam Clerk, item 34, please.
An ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title 4 Zoning Code, Chapter 29-2, Public Capital Facilities Impact Fees Ordinance, Article 29-2-1-3, Administration Section, Incentives for Redevelopment of Blighted, Underutilized, Abandoned, or Contaminated Buildings, and Table 4 City Priority Redevelopment Projects.
Thank you very much.
Move approval. Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve this item. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, ready for the question? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Motion adopted. Item 30, so we will not be voting on 35 because that needs to be voted on in November. We will not be voting on 36. That needs to be voted on November. We will not be voting on 37. That needs to be voted on November. Takes us to item 38, please.
A resolution appropriating $60,000, including authorizing the issuance of bonds and notes in the amount of $60,000 as the local agency match the replacement of Concord area transit bus vehicles, CIP 584.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve this item. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, ready for the question? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Having received the necessary 2/3, motion is adopted. Item 39, please.
An ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title 1 General Code, Chapter 15, Licensing and Regulation of Businesses, Trades, and Occupations.
Move approval. Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve this item. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And the ayes have it. Motion's adopted. Item 40, please.
An ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title 4 Zoning Code, Chapter 28-9-4, Decisions by the Planning Board, Site Plan Review, Projects exempt from Site Plan Review.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve this item. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a question on item 40 that I didn't think of at the time that Mr. Bahia was up here.
Sure. Mr. Bahia, want to come back up?
Mr. Bahia, if we remove the site plan review for these types of projects, is there going to be any type of review if there's anything done to the exterior of the buildings?
So, Mayor Pro Tem, if they pull a building permit because they're doing exterior work, then there would be a review at that point. It would probably have to go to the, not would probably, actually, it would trigger an architectural design review process because it's in a performance district.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Any comments? Seeing none, ready for the question? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Item 40 is adopted. Madam Clerk, item 41, please.
An ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title IV, Zoning Code, Chapter 29, 2-1-2B1, Public Capital, Facilities Impact Fee Ordinance, Assessment and Collection.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made, second approved. Item 41, impact fees. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Madam Clerk, item 42, please.
An ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title IV, Zoning Code, Chapter 29, 2-1-2E, Public Capital Facilities Impact Fee Ordinance, Assessment and Collection for waivers.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made, second approved this item. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Motion is adopted. That brings us back to where we left off on public hearings, which would be item 28O. And before we start, we're going to take a 2-minute recess.
5 Administrative Code, Chapter 35 Classification and Compensation Plan, Schedule D of Article 35-2 Class Specification Index for the Public Information Officer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bailly.
Your Honor, members of council, the effective use of communication, as you know, has been a council priority for several years. Some time ago, the council created a communications coordinator's position in the General Services Department. That's allowed General Services to reach out to the public through website, email, Facebook, YouTube, and I think we'd all argue that it's been pretty successful, but it has been limited to a single department. As for the remaining city departments, they've all made independent attempts to enhance their communication. So you've had anything from electronic newsletters, you've had individual Facebook pages, you've had printed brochures. These have all been pretty solid efforts, but there's been a lack of a coherent city message, and that is important for a number of reasons, including for economic development implications. Today, if a site selector is starting a search or a C-suite executive for a company looking to relocate, the first place they're probably going to go is to just a search engine and type in City of Concord or Concord, New Hampshire. And, you know, the question is, what are they going to find? Who controls that message? We do a lot of positive things here in the city, but if we let someone else control all of our messaging, then in reality, the information can be inaccurate, distorted, etc. Fiscal Policy Advisory Committee looked at this issue, and they recommended that council create a public information officer to oversee the city's external communications. The Public Information Officer, or PIO, we anticipate would develop a comprehensive messaging approach to the city. Typically, PIOs in other communities will, for example, meet with city departments on a daily basis. They'll follow a new or an emergent issue throughout the sort of evolution of the issue. In our case, particularly with our robust capital program, one of the things that I'm sure everyone recognizes is we design great projects, we build great projects, we're lousy communicators. When we had the Main Street project, the City Council, in its wisdom, hired an outside firm to do PR communications, and I think that everybody will agree that proved a resounding success and really helped the project. So what I imagine this PIO would do in terms of the projects, for example, come in, map out strategically over a period of a year, 18 months, all the different projects the community is working on in different departments, and figure out phased approach to messaging, coherent messaging, the social media platform, a strategic campaign to get information out clearly to the public. Of course, they'd also do the traditional mainstays. They'd update the city website. They'd post to a variety of social media platforms. And to reflect the sort of access needed and the importance of this position, it would report directly to the city manager. What we found in doing some research on these types of positions is that they function best when they're part of a communications team, usually a 2 or 3 person team. And in fact, FPAC also recognized that, and they recommended that the communications coordinator position, which I cited initially, that's in general services, that position could physically remain in general services, but it would be part of this team, incorporated into this team, working and reporting directly to the PIO. In order to make that change, one thing that we all see is that social media is not an 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. type of position. It's a 24/7 position. In fact, communities that have these types of communications teams, they can respond to posts. We had one community responded to posts, all posts, within 60 minutes. Actually, they respond to posts 72% of the time within 60 minutes. So that's pretty impressive if you think about, you know, things coming in the evening on the weekends. So this position is recommended. In addition, this change, in addition to the PIO position, is recommended. It would change the labor grade for the communications coordinator position from a 16 to a 17. It would also make the position exempt, again, to reflect that 24/7 commitment. And the labor grade change, if you notice, the PIO position is effective this evening if you approve it. The communications coordinator position would only take effect in January because we anticipate we would start a recruitment tomorrow or this week. And for the PIO, we'd anticipate hiring the PIO, bringing them on probably by January, and then having this position start working as that team. The third leg to the communications team is really a video component. If you ever looked at your Facebook page or any other social media, you will realize that most of what you see is video now. Video is the new normal. That's how people get messages across. And we had to accomplish that, we're going to need a lot of help. The manager and I have reached out to Doris Ballard with Concord Television, and it's basically created a win-win potential if this is approved. Concord TV has a mission to generate content, to work with the community, to really foster new video services to the city. We would have a need to have content made for us, and our PIO, if approved this evening, and a communications coordinator would be working closely to sort of direct what kind of content we would need. So again, it'd be a win-win for both entities. In terms of a fiscal impact, the PIO position is proposed to be a labor grade 19 that has a salary range of between $51,000 and $74,000 roughly per year. The fiscal impact this current FY18 year would be funded from the Economic Development Reserve. The communications coordinator, that labor grade change, would have an impact of less than $1,000 in this current fiscal year. And there wouldn't be any fiscal impact from the use of Concord Television. Again, that would be sort of a partnership that would help both entities. Be happy to take any questions.
Councilor Stein.
Thank you, Your Honor. Help me understand why, what the communication coordinator would be doing that the public information officer couldn't do by talking to the various departments.
What the communications coordinator would be doing in addition to the
right, so why wouldn't the public information officer be able to talk to the various departments? What is going to be the function of the communications coordinator? Is that
Sure.
I'm not comfortable with both positions.
Okay, understand. What we found is that because there's again, a 24/7 type of component to this, that's part of it, in essence, to have one person just be responsible for that, you don't get the typical responsiveness that you would if you had another person you could rely on to share some of that responsibility during off hours, weekends, et cetera. That's one element. The other element is there's a synergy to having more than one person where you can talk about a strategy and marketing campaigns and sort of ideas that you may not get with just a single person doing it sort of in a little bit of a vacuum. And so those were the two principles, and those we found success stories in a couple of other communities that seemed to work effectively. So that's what we bring before you this evening.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll have questions. All right, one more time. So here's where I hear complaints. General Services doesn't tell people when we're going to be towing cars and such, that it's still really the going out there and posting on the sides of the streets with the little signs and such that actually get people's attention, not to park there overnight, you're going to be doing snow removal, whatever. What can we be doing at General Services to get that better? Content seems to be pretty flat. There's not real lot. There's not much graphics. You're not really seeing what's going on. What can we do to improve, with General Services communications? In terms of your department with engineering, there's the communication we did with Main Street, but we had Exit 17 going on, and we can list all the other projects going on. You still had neighbors with a whole lot of questions, kind of a lack of, where's that email response, where's the Twitter, letting people know exactly we're going to be in front of your house today, we're going to be doing this today. Because by the time they read it in the manager's memo, if people even know what that is, or if they've ever heard of it, or they go to the website, it's kind of long gone. Work being done on Loudon Road, people sitting in traffic, are we notifying people? So which position would that be?
So I see that as being basically part of the team effort, but the PIO would ultimately be responsible for really coming up with the message and ultimately accountable for the message. And you're absolutely right. That sort of real-time information, that is something that we don't have the capacity to do today. When we do our information items for the city manager's newsletter, I think they're well done, but there are moments in time. And if things change, we try to send out emails to our email groups, but it's not the type of response that this contemplates.
Council Council.
Thank you. I'm wondering, what would the relationship be between the information officer and this new position in terms of, is it a peer-to-peer? Is it a, who's really in charge?
Council, the way we have written it up here this evening, the PIO would be in charge, ultimately accountable for the messaging. The communications coordinator is not a new position, it's an existing position, and they would be reporting to the PIO.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Councilor Gray Sexton.
Thank you, Your Honor. And what would the relationship be between the PIO, the comms coordinator, and the economic development director? I assume they'd be working closely to promote the city?
Yes.
To attract business?
Correct. Everything that we, I shouldn't say everything, but most everything that we do here in the city in the last several years has been towards economic development and fostering it. I think the Main Street project was a case in point. It was not just about infrastructure, it was about bringing tax base, and we've seen projects like the Dole Sol project this evening that basically brings that to fruition. So we work very closely, and we've talked with Ms. Pegg about this position. She's very excited about this opportunity because she has a lot of skills herself, but this is, again, another person adds a layer that she couldn't possibly support for the entire city.
Wonderful, thank you.
Council Chaplain.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Mayor, I have to say that I think this is just the right direction to go in. In the public relations world, there's a maxim that you should speak with one clear voice. And I think that this position and the structure you're suggesting around it would allow the city to speak with one clear voice regarding in a variety of ways. I know that the Chamber is talking about efforts to promote the city, and I think it's absolutely vital that we also have a contact person within city government that groups like the Chamber who are interested in economic development, tourist promotion, encouraging people to visit Concord as a destination, have someone to coordinate their efforts with so that we're not dissonant, so that we're all harmonized and all speaking with that one clear voice. So thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Councilor Grace Sexton.
Thank you, Your Honor. How do you envision the PIO interacting with the police department?
Great question. So if there's an active incident that involves the police department, whatever it might be, a catastrophe, et cetera, we would always anticipate that the person in front of the microphones, live on TV, will be an officer in uniform. That's not going to change. In most of the communities that have this type of PIO, that's the way it operates there. What the PIO can do is follow the evolution of that incident and provide updates to the public that obviously would have to be approved by the police department in terms of what information can be released if there's an active investigation. But they'd get that information out, which frees up the time of the officers themselves to actually do the work that's needed to resolve whatever the matter is.
Follow-up? Same with fire?
Same thing with fire, yes, ma'am.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. Good to see you. We'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify on this item? Mr. Swiker.
This one's probably the most fun for me because I spent the last 2 weeks trying to get information out of the city and having very little luck with it. It's like I was trying to find the total valuation of the city, and it may be on the city website, but I couldn't find it. I had to get it from the State Department of Education. So, I mean, there's certainly an issue here, but, this idea you're going to answer this stuff in 30 to 60 minutes, I mean, come off it. They haven't answered any of my questions in weeks. And particularly, I was nearly laughed when I was talking about what a great deal it was at General Services. There's probably one or two of you remember, I've been trying for several years to get the leaf collection schedule posted, and they've never managed to do it. And 2 weeks ago, I asked them, how much does it cost to take the leaf collection, worksheets and put them on the web like you do with winter alerts, or send them out to an email list? And 2 weeks I don't have an answer as to what it even costs to do it. So I think that maybe you're being a little bit optimistic if you think that unless you change the culture of the city, that we should be trying to tell people things instead of hiding it from them, that these people are going to be able to provide good information. But I think more openness would be great, but unless you change the culture of the city, that the public is entitled to know what's going on in this city, that hiring public information people is not going to help. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anyone else wish to testify on this item? Seeing none, close the public hearing. Madam Clerk, item 28P, please.
It's a resolution appropriating a sum of $660,000 for improvements to the School Street parking garage, CIP 433, and authorizing the issuance of bonds and notes in the amount of up to $660,000.
Mr. Walsh.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the council again. There is a report that was provided. It's fairly detailed. I won't go into it in great detail. This project's had a long history. It goes back to 2012 when we first did a structural assessment, found out and discovered that the garage had numerous issues at the time. The initial estimate at that time in 2012, almost 6 years ago, was about a $3 million repair was needed. We decided to not move forward with the repair at that time because of parking impacts that were going to be occurring because of the Complete Street project, as well as the financial condition of the parking fund. The Complete Street project is completed. The parking study will be coming forward in the next few months, and frankly, the garage can't wait any longer. Unfortunately, when we went out to bid, because of the environment that's out there with the economy, we only received one bid. It was very high, nearly double the budget. We ended up rejecting that bid, trying to negotiate with that bidder, as well as a second party that never bid on the original bid. Ended up with a bid of about $4.6 million. Based on that, we're going to need $660,000 to move forward with the project. To put that in perspective, the full debt service on that will be around $900,000, and it would be an average of about $45,000 a year if we were going to do 20 years at 4%. There's a list of improvements that would be made to the garage, so this isn't just putting, making structural repairs to the garage. It's also adding various amenities to the garage. So, for example, we're going to be replacing both stair towers. They're going to be glassed in. That's going to be better for our patrons. It's going to be easier for us to clean the facility, and it's going to have structural. It's going to help the facility last longer. There's going to be a new elevator. The elevator that's in there now is used. It was put in 1983. There's going to be new LED lighting. It'll be brighter. It'll make people more comfortable for being in there. There's going to be a surveillance system installed. There's going to be new signage, as well as the other basic steel and concrete repairs that are going to be done. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council might have.
Councilor Schleck.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. So help me with the timeline here. In November, the fiscal budget we passed last year was in June, and when we appropriated about $4.5 million. What wasn't spent on that left with 4.7. So my question is that additional money, the $3.2 million that we appropriated in 2017 to get to 4.5 million, where did we come up with that number? Was that a consultant that had made those recommendations to us?
It was myself working with the consultant on the project, and we thought that that would be sufficient. That was before we did the final bid specs, and it was before we went out to bid.
So 1 year after, I'm sorry, Your Honor, if I could, thank you. So 1 year after the bid, 1 year after the estimate, we're seeing a bid that's almost twice as much as the anticipated cost. We're seeing this time and time again. I'm not trying to pick on you, but again, I'm wondering how we avoid this in the future. I know we're looking at using a construction management form for the skate house earlier on in the process, but this is. If it's frustrating for me, I can only imagine how frustrating it is for the people who are paying, the rest of the people in the community who are paying for this. So my question is, what are we going to do to avoid these really wild discrepancies in the future?
So, Councilor, if you look on page 3 of the report, we had an available budget of just under $4.2 million. The construction cost is $4.6 million. The difference is $436,000. That's not double the available funds. There was a bid that was submitted by one contractor that was double that, and frankly, we had numerous issues with that bid, which is why we rejected it. And there's an issue with the ongoing, with the way the economy is today. There are a limited number of contractors that are available to do the work. People are literally picking and choosing jobs. There are a limited number of subs that we need to do the project. And when this was bid in the spring, it's not an ideal time to bid, but we had to move forward at that based on what our schedule was. And, to come in with a budget that's 14.4% over what we had, I'm not happy about it, and I don't think the city manager is either. But it could have been much worse than that, given the conditions that we're in for this particular economy and how robust it is and how much is going on out there right now as far as work. Do I regret that it comes in at 14.4% over? Sure. Do I think it could have been much worse? Absolutely.
So if I just want one follow-up, if I may, Your Honor. So I also noticed in the report that there were a number of items that were removed in order to keep it at that 14% over and not higher. Do we know, is there some way to know what the bid would have been if we didn't take out those original items?
So on page 2 at the bottom, it talks about landscaping, resurfacing a parking lot on Warren Street, and pedestrian plaza repairs. So we do have alternate pricing on some of those, which I can give to you. They were never part of the base scope work. We simply, as we do with many of our projects, bid those as extras to see what they might cost and what the city could afford to do if there was leftover dollars. I can get that information to you, but I don't have it with me tonight.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Thank you. With that, anyone wishing to testify on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
It's a resolution accepting and appropriate the sum of $21,618 in unmatched grant funds from the United States Department of Justice, funds designed for law enforcement-related programs.
Thank you. Ms. Manager.
Over the past several years, the police department has received these grants from this program, which we've used to make technical upgrades, purchase new equipment, provide training, department personnel. These awards have been and will be shared with the Merrimack County Sheriff's Office, which has also made equipment and technological enhancements with these funds. Be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify in the public hearing? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Madam Clerk, item 28R, please.
A resolution accepting and appropriating the sum of $62,551 in grant funding from the New Hampshire Department of Safety, funds designated for conducting illegal drug-related investigations.
Thank you very much. Mr. Manager.
Your Honor, members of the council, this grant will allow the Concord Police Department to fund overtime costs associated with implementing programs to address the opioid issue. There is no requirement for any matching city funds to be obligated as part of this program.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wish to testify? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Madam Clerk, item 28S, please.
A resolution accepting and appropriating the sum of $749,030.26 in one-time highway block grant funds under SB 38 as a transfer to the Highway Reserve Fund.
Thank you very much. Ms. Manager.
Nothing to add, Your Honor.
Good summary. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wish to testify at the public hearing? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Madam Clerk, item 28T, please.
A resolution appropriating the sum of $62,820 to the Project Inspection Golf and Sears Block Tax Increment Finance Funds, operating budgets for fiscal year 2017.
Thank you very much. Mr. Manager.
Your Honor, members of the council, each year during the annual budget process, expense budgets are developed based on anticipated needed historical usage. For fiscal year 17, the actual needs in these funds exceeded expectations, and a supplemental appropriation request balances the amount appropriated with the amount actually expended.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the manager? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wish to testify on this? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Madam Clerk, item 28U, please.
It's an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title I, General Code, Chapter 1, Government Organization, Article 1-6, Code of Ethics.
Thank you. Mr. Manager or Mr. Kennedy?
I have nothing to add other than what's in the report. I don't believe Mr. Kennedy does either.
Well, let's ask him. Mr. Kennedy, do you have anything to add?
If there are any questions beyond what's in the report, I'm happy to answer.
Okay. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wish to testify? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. That takes us back to our action phase. And I believe, if I kept track properly, we are on item 43. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
An ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title V, Administrative Code, Chapter 35, Classification and Compensation Plan, Schedule D of Article 35-2, Class Specification Index for the Public Information Officer.
Move approval. Second. Motion made, second to approve this item. Any discussion? Councilor Schleyer.
Well, I think there's value in the public information officer. I'm not convinced that we need a communications coordinator at this time. Since we're going to be voting, which will fund both positions, I'm finding myself I'm going to have to vote against this proposal this evening.
Okay, anyone else? What would people think of, for discussion purposes, what would you think if we did the PIO position, did not change the existing communications coordinator, and we went forth with the video specialist, since it's the relationship with the Concord TV? What do you think of that?
No objection.
I have none.
How does that make you feel?
So I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
So what I was looking at and kind of just evaluating the overall report, which I thought was very detailed, thank you. In terms of the team and what's working now, to understand better how the team would work and such, what if we went with the public information officer? I think that, to me, that makes sense. And how somebody else asked the question, I think, but, you know, in terms of how we communicate with police, fire, how this works in coordination with our economic development director. So that seems to make some sense to me. The change in the position to the communications, bless you, communications coordinator position, why don't we just put a hold on that for now, figure out how that fits into the team in the future, and then in terms of the third element being the video specialist, doesn't seem like that really is any money per se. Maybe I have that wrong, but it does continue the strong relationship with Concord TV to do the video, and I think in today's world, it seems like you have to have all forms of communication in the video. And I think Concord TV does a great job, and that might be a way to do it. Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to be clear on.
Don't make me say it again.
No, we're just.
You're dividing the question.
Yeah.
Or change the motion.
If,
Yeah.
what happens, so we broke it down to 3 separate categories, correct?
That's how I do it.
And if by chance the second category is voted no, does that mean the person in that current position would?
Stays the same.
Okay.
That position exists.
And so what we're voting for in that position, or that person in that position, is an increase in a pay grade.
Well, if you read the report the same way I do, the changing of the existing communication coordinator position from labor grade 16 to labor grade 17 will have less than $1,000 impact in FY18.
Right.
But I guess for me, it's not just money. It's also the relationship and how this all works together. I think it's best to get a good grip on how we're going to kind of coordinate these activities.
Thank you.
Councilor Slade.
Thank you, Your Honor. So if I understand this correctly, the communication coordinator's position would remain the same, or potentially remain the same, so half the time would be as an administrative assistant and half would be if we didn't vote to approve. Okay.
That's how I would understand as well. Unless.
No, you have it exactly right.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? What, I mean, does anybody, what do you think of that? I'm just trying to capture what we really need, and I think that is the PIO position. And hopefully that will allow us to do a little more real-time type stuff, but more importantly, we're really dovetail and coordinate with the Economic Development Director. That's my read on it, but Councilor Champlin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Is this going to create any confusion over lines of authority and responsibility?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. Councilor Slade.
Thank you. So if we could, I would ask that we vote on the communication coordinator's position first. If that's approved as been recommended, then I'll find myself not being able to support the PIO position. I don't want to be put in a position, I prefer not to be put in.
Just for the parliamentary procedure. So right now, we have one motion before us. That motion is to approve this item. That motion's been made and seconded. Otherwise, there's nothing else on the table. I tried to throw something out there for consideration.
It's your motion, you have to.
So if somebody wanted to amend the
It's
motion,
you.
they
It's
can do
you.
that. If you want
Okay.
to just keep it as is, we can do that. We can, however you'd like to proceed.
I think it'd be fine to amend the motion and take it up as you offered. We'd have to undo the standing motion and go to a new motion.
I'm fine modifying the motion, Your Honor.
Who seconded?
I did, I believe. Did you put my name down?
There were lots
several.
of voices.
Yeah.
Which one did you write down?
Just wrote that it was seconded.
So for purposes of moving along, we'll say that Councilor Kretovic seconded the motion.
I will agree to second the amending or modifying of the motion.
Thank you, Councilor.
You're welcome.
All right, so I'm going to try to repeat this so that
The amendment
We all
that
understand it the
Counselor-
exact same way. So this item would be approved. This item would approve the public information officer. This item would not affect the communications coordinator whatsoever, and it would still encourage the whole video specialist working in the coordination with the Concord TV. Is that the way your motion says?
So moved, Your Honor.
And seconded.
Any discussion on that?
Thank you, Your Honor.
No, thank you.
Thank you both.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, you ready for the question? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? You guys have it. Motion's adopted. Item 44, please.
A resolution appropriating the sum of $660,000 for improvements to the School Street Parking Garage, CIP number 433, and authorizing the issuance of bonds and notes in the amount of up to $660,000.
Thank you very much.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve this item. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. Ready for the question? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All is opposed. Having received the necessary two-thirds, the motion is adopted. Item 45, please.
Is a resolution accepting and appropriating the sum of $21,618 in unmatched grant funds from the United States Department of Justice, funds designated for law enforcement-related programs.
Thank you very much.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, ready for the question? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Have it. Having received the necessary two-thirds, motion is adopted. Item 46, please.
Is a resolution accepting and appropriating the sum of $62,551 in grant funding from the New Hampshire Department of Safety, funds designated for conducting illegal drug-related investigations.
We have a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve this item. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, ready for the question? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Having received necessary two-thirds, motion is adopted. Item 47, please.
A resolution accepting and appropriating the sum of $749,030.26 in one-time highway block grant funds under SB 38 as a transfer to the Highway Reserve Fund.
Move approval.
Now, that's something we can all get behind, is that not? Did you get that one?
I can say Blair's voice.
You got moved and seconded, all right. Is there any discussion? I'll just simply add, oftentimes I'm critical of the state, but this time I am going to say thank you, thank you, thank you. So Representative Shurtleff, Representative Kanston, job done.
We do what we can.
We try.
I heard you two are personally responsible for this.
Well, actually, it was.
He put the 26 cents on. All right, seriously though, this is wonderful. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Let's all be in this one. Ready?
We're waiting.
Favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Have received necessary two-thirds. The motion is adopted. Well done. All right. Item 48.
Is a resolution appropriating the sum of $62,820 to the Project Inspection Golf and Sears Block Tax Increment Finance Funds operating budgets for fiscal year 2017.
Thank you.
Approval. Second.
Motion made second to approve this item. Is there any discussion? Councilor Schley.
Thank you, Your Honor. Last month, we forgave $75,000, approximately $75,000 in administrative fees at the golf course. Was returning to the city. We're going to, I believe it's about another $6,000 that we're going to be taking from the reserve fund to keep the operating budget balanced. I would request of the city manager that we don't wait until the next budget cycle for some recommendations as to how we could generate some additional revenue for the golf course.
If the council wants to make that a motion, I mean, I look at that every single time I put together a budget, if there's ways to cut expenditures or increase revenues, but.
Okay. So we have motion to approve this item before us. Your comments, I think, are incorporated in the general budget.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think it's. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, you ready for the vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Guys have it. Madam Clerk, item 49, please.
An ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title I, General Code, Chapter 1, Government Organization, Article 1-6, Code of Ethics.
Thank you very much. Motion made and seconded to approve this item. Mr. Solicitor, you want anything now? Still all set? I just wanted to make sure you were on television. That's all I was looking for. All right. So for everybody at home, that was our solicitor, Mr. Kennedy. Your wife and children will know you were here at the meeting. All right. Ready for the question? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Item 49 is adopted. Actually, I apologize. Did I say there was a two-thirds vote on item 48?
You did.
Okay. So everybody recognize item 48 was approved by two-thirds, and the 49 was just simply majority. We have no reports, no new business. Anybody want to take off unfinished business? Seeing it not come off, what takes us to comments. Anybody have any questions think they'd like to share? Counselor, we'll go this way. Counselor Hersler.
Thank you, Your Honor. I wrote this down so I won't make too many mistakes. Ward 2 is going to have a candidates forum. All the mayoral and at-large candidates have been invited. It will be on October 25th, that's a Wednesday, at the Newell Post Restaurant at 6 o'clock. We hope everybody could attend, and all are invited. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Councilor Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Over the past several months, the Concord Energy and Environment Committee has been considering a variety of strategies to suggest that our city become 100% renewable by the year 2050. So what our committee will be doing on Saturday morning at the State House is to formally launch this campaign called Concord Ready for 100 Renewable Energy. And there are many strategies that we're going to be pursuing and working with colleagues here and city staff and folks around our community and beyond Concord to see what we can do to make our city the most sustainable community that we can, doing the right thing for the environment and being efficient and saving our taxpayers money in the process. So it's 10 a.m. at the State House on Saturday, and I hope to see some of you there and to see many folks in the Concord community there as well.
Thank you. Councilor Todd.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would just like to recognize our colleague from Ward 4, Councilor Champlin, who among his many talents is actually a World War I history expert. And to that end, he will be making a presentation at the Pennacook Historical Society's World War I series as part of the Over There, Over Here celebration. It's actually commemorating the United States entry into World War I 100 years ago. And that will be on Sunday, October 15th at 2 o'clock. And the presentation is called A City at War, and it'll take place at the Rolfe House, which is 11 Pennacook Street in Pennacook. And I urge all of you to attend this free and very informative event. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll have to visit after I go to the Elizabeth Hockey.
That's a great mix.
Hockey and history.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I received a letter, an email from a constituent who is concerned about an ordinance we have through the Conservation Commission that he walks and hikes regularly on the Broken Ground trails. And we allow hunting on conservation land, which I have no problem with that. But as our trails get heavily used, some of our trails are really popular and heavily used by hikers and walkers. His concern is maybe the two activities are getting too close together. So I would respectfully ask that if I could refer his concern, his letter to the Conservation Commission to look at the issue to see if we need to look more at the safety of this and to allow both for the hunting and for the these popular trails that have hiking and walkers.
Anybody object to referring the letter to Conservation Commission? Council 9, do you reject?
I had a comment.
All right.
Maybe we could also refer to the Recreation Committee for, to look at, maybe it would be better that we allow hunting and not walking in that particular area. So let's have a look at it from a really open perspective. We have plenty of hike trails, not a lot of place to hunt in the city.
And then I wholly agree. The intent is not to get rid of hunting, but just to look at the proximity of both populations. And I said the Conservation Commission because the ordinance is under the Conservation Commission. But anywhere you want to send it.
So
great.
Conservation Commission and Recreation for a healthy discussion. Does everybody have a problem with that? Is that okay? Sound good?
And currently, apparently, there's a flyer available I was made aware of, but it's hard to find on the city website or the Park and Rec website about being aware that during hunting seasons, you should be aware that there are hunters around the trails, and hopefully maybe we can just do some more outreach and letting people know that it is a shared resource. PIO officer.
Avoid brown, wear orange.
Yes, wear orange. Make noise.
Okay. Anybody else have anything they want to share? Mr. Manager, have anything?
Yes, I had just three quick things. I would like to, and I know I've never done this before, I'd like to thank.
You couldn't find it on the website.
I'm sure some people have, I didn't have any problem finding it on the website, which we're redoing right now, as a matter of fact. I'd like to thank Mr. Bahia and Mr. Walsh in particular for putting together some excellent items on this agenda. What you see on this agenda, I think, moves the community forward in many ways. And I know you have all seen all the background work and all the committee work that went on in this, but it's a tremendous lift. And I just want to thank them both. But also, to tie it all together, the city clerk did a fabulous job putting together this agenda, and this was very difficult because with 21 public hearings and to make sure all the information was there, along with an update of the entire Granicus program, I think was very well done. So I just wanted to thank the three of them for a job well done.
That's it. Well said.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, thank you. That takes us to item 17, which we removed from consent. Madam Clerk.
This was removed from the consent agenda by Councilor Hirschlag. It's a report from the city engineer recommending that the city manager be authorized to apply for U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration, Transportation Investment Generating Economic Recovery, Tiger Grant Program funds.
Okay, Councilor Hirschlag.
Thank you, Your Honor. After speaking with our city engineer and reviewing the criteria for the Tiger Grant, I thought it was important to pull this item because I feel before we go forward looking to accumulate funds for this project, I don't believe that we've had a public hearing to determine what the public would like to do. We've had a public hearing to put it on the CIP. We've heard reports from the organization that's promoting this greenway. But we've seen in the past when we've applied for the Tiger Grant for Main Street that we were really pushed up against deadlines. We were told that we weren't able to move forward with certain protocols, lining the streets to see if they work, doing a parking study. We were all told that we didn't have time. And then we were told when we applied for the grant that if the community didn't favor the project, that we didn't have to accept the grant. Except after the grant was awarded us, we were told that if we returned the money or decided not to go forward with the project, that it would make it difficult for us to go to receive a grant in the future. I understand the conundrum or the quandary we're in. The grant application was for a very short period of time. It's from the middle of September. It's due the middle of October. I do have a couple of suggestions as maybe how we could go forward without obligating the city to utilize the grant if that's not the wishes of the community. And even if it is, I think it's important that we hear from the community. So I would like to suggest that we provide the administration with the ability to submit the application with the understanding that over the next month or two, we will hold a public hearing on this project. If that is agreeable to the council, I will move to place this back on the consent agenda for approval.
Is that a motion? I think so.
I'll make that as a motion.
So I apologize, but just, so the motion is to approve this, authorize the manager to apply for the US DOT, Federal Highway Administration, Tiger Grant Program, and have a public hearing within the next 2 months.
So that, with the understanding that a public hearing would be held no later than our November city council meeting. I'll go December.
So the next 2 months.
Right.
Anything else?
No.
I have a question.
Sure.
This is for the city engineer, if he doesn't mind answering. Do we have any idea when we would hear back on the Tiger Grant awards?
I would say not until about April or May.
Months. Thanks.
Okay, is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Well, you seconded, so Council 9.
Yeah, I appreciate what Council Hirschlag's doing. I do remember the prior Tiger grants, there was some coordination issues, then we did end up kind of cornering ourselves. I think the way forward to approve it, subject to a public hearing, and as Councilor Kretovic said, the city engineer said, we can theoretically withdraw an application up until April, whenever the award's going to be granted. I think it's plenty of time to have a public hearing. I don't like pigeonholing ourselves over the next 2 months. It could theoretically be the next 6 months, and I'd kind of leave that up to staff. That'd be my only caveat, is that we have a public hearing before it's awarded. Have whenever the staff thinks it's the most appropriate time to do so.
If Council 9 is willing to amend my motion, I'll accept the amendment.
What did you amend?
I think he was supporting you.
I was supporting with really Councilor Hirschlag, with the only change I would suggest is we let staff determine when the most appropriate time is to have the public hearing.
As long as it was before April, or?
It would be prior to the
awarding?
Correct.
I'd be willing to accept that.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to vote against the motion. I mean, the last time we were successful in receiving a Tiger grant was for the Main Street project. And we had multiple public hearings for years, literally. I don't see the benefit in having a public hearing prior to a date certain before we know what project we're even granted. I mean, what are we gonna talk about? I mean, I think we have to have something on the table for the community to consider to have a public hearing, and not have a public hearing in a vacuum. So for those reasons, knowing that we will have a public hearing to accept the money on the project, not accept it, I'm going to vote against that motion.
Okay, Councilor Kretovic.
Thank you, Your Honor. I am with Councilor St. Hilaire. I will not be voting in favor of the motion that's on the table right now. Transportation Policy Advisory Committee looked at all of these projects that were recommended in this report for consideration. The Merrimack River Greenway Trail and the opportunity that we have with the soon-to-be abandoned line for the Pan Am ties in one Tiger project in our community to a potential Tiger project in another community. The extensive time and energy it takes to put these grants together, it doesn't warrant any pause whatsoever, not to mention once we submit it, we can't change it. So to have a public hearing with the potential to change what the outcome will be of our grant application will kill our grant application. The greatest challenge in these applications is to do the economic or the benefit cost analysis for the economic portion of the Tiger economic recovery portion of the grant. If we change the grant, we change the benefit cost analysis, which is significant, detailed, and we know from the previous grant application we put together for Main Street, it took the most amount of time. I wouldn't edit anything at this point, and the likelihood that we would get the grant is small. It's high competition, but they're awesome grants. We know that it was beneficial to our community. I would hope that we would want more economic recovery here.
Who else? Councilor 9.
I guess in a roundabout way of saying, I think Councilor Kretovic, you argued Councilor Hirschlag's point for him, which is once the application goes in, we can't amend it, and all he's asking for is a public hearing to gauge the public's interest rather than our own council interest. And I firmly believe that I represent Ward 7, and I think it's a good project. I think process, though, I think Councilor Hirschlag's right. We haven't had a public hearing on it, and we probably should. So.
If I may, Your Honor?
Sure.
So we will know what's what's in the grant because we'll see the grant application, and the public would have an opportunity to comment on that. As far as amending the grant, Mr. Roberge could correct me if I'm mistaken. I believe we did amend the Tiger grant for the Main Street program. We asked for some extensions and some changes on that. Originally, we had one of the highlights of that grant, and it appears that one of the reasons that grant was accepted was because we were going to heat our sidewalks. That, at some point, we became aware that we weren't able to, and we had to notify the Department of Transportation that wasn't going to be part of our grant, and they still allowed us to keep the grant. The idea of having a public hearing, while it may or may not wind up with the public asking to amend it or make adjustments, is to hear what the public has to say. It's not a matter of I like this or don't like this project. It's a matter of we're putting this grant application in. It's a $10 million application. The city would be responsible, as I understand it, for $1 million. We haven't negotiated with Pan Am for purchase of the railroad rights. We haven't had community input on it. To me, I think it's imperative that we hear what the public has to say before we commit ourselves to accepting the money.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think it is not a good use of resources to have a public hearing before we know we've even qualified or received the grant. We're having a public hearing just for the sake of talking about things, and we may not even get the grant. I mean, that's, to me, a waste of time for the community and for us. If we are lucky enough to get the grant, then we can have a public hearing. So if the motion wants to be amended to say, let's have a public hearing prior to deciding to accept the grant, I'm fine with that. I just don't want to have a hearing. Let's just randomly have a date on March 2nd. Let's go have a hearing on that date before we even receive money. I mean, I don't understand what the point is.
Councilor Champlin.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I ask a question of the city engineer? Sure. Would this, I see he's approaching the bench, so I'll pause.
Been here all night.
I didn't want him to think he was here for no reason.
Make sure we have a hearing then.
Thank you, Mr. Roberge. Would this kind of contingency-based approval of the grant application in any way undermine the viability of the application?
No, as Councilor Kretovic mentioned before, the application due date is October 16th. That's next Monday. So what gets submitted is a generally final application. We did go through some amendments on the Tiger grant for Main Street. 4 of those amendments of the 5 were really voluntary, where we added extra work, either the lighting components or the underground utility components. All of those changes were rolled in. So there is some flexibility in the grant, but substantially, the gist of the project is what we submit on October 16th.
May I follow up, Your Honor? So let me rephrase this. So if I am a federal official who's looking at grant applications, is it possible that the fact that we've said, yes, we want to apply, but we want to hold a public hearing, and if the people in the public hearing say that they don't like the idea, then we're going to pull our grant, is that going to make it a weaker application?
No, because the expectation, as Councilor St. Hilaire mentioned before, the public process really begins after the grant is awarded. There would be a full vetting of the components of the project, what details are there, the design elements of it, as well as the appropriation of funds. So that public process will be part of the project. There's been, we would say, several public processes that have gone along already on this project.
So the normal procedure is to have the public hearings after you find out whether you received the grant?
That would be our process, yes. That's what we've done in the past.
Councilor Kretovic.
Thank you, Your Honor. I actually have 2 thoughts now after Councilor Champlin's. Isn't that our normal process already, is that when we apply for a grant and then the grant is awarded to the city, regardless of what the grant source is, before we accept that, there's a public hearing? Is that correct, Mr. Manager?
You're required to have a public hearing to accept those additional funds and expend those funds, yes.
Thank you. And then with the specific regard to the Tiger grant application, my understanding of these grants are from our history that we had here in Concord, the Tiger grant. You put in your application, The Federal Highway assigns you an individual that talks to you specifically about your grant application, and they are your point person. The first grant that we submitted for Main Street was rejected entirely, and the person told us these are the improvements you need to make on your application. And then we submitted a second grant application. Am I correct?
That's correct.
And that is most likely what will occur here. You will have an individual at Federal Highway that will tell you how to strengthen or where the weaknesses are in the application that we submit. Whether we get accepted or not is secondary to the point person that you get that tells us how we scale with the rest of the projects across the country that are applying for Tiger, correct?
That's correct.
Thanks.
Councilor Todd. Thank you, Your Honor. I'm swayed by the logic of Mayor Pro Tem St. Hilaire, because I heard Councilor Hirschlag state that he said this is not a question about whether or not people want the project or don't want the project. If he hadn't said that, I might be inclined to actually vote for his proposal, because if we felt that there was a large number of people out there who might be thinking, you know what, we've got enough trails, we shouldn't be spending money on this, we shouldn't be doing it, I think that might be a good reason for a public hearing. No, we don't want you to apply for this grant. Okay, fair enough. But in fact, I have to say that I had a Ward 1 public meeting last week, and of the 40 or so people who were there, we made the Greenway Trail a topic of discussion, and no one said that to me, and no one has said that to me in my ward at all, that they feel that this is a bad use of city funds, that this is a bad project. So, you know, in fact, there were several people who made various points about their concerns about materials that might be used on the trail, those kinds of details that I think can all be worked out later. So I won't be voting for this motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. The part that strikes me about the argument that we have today that is bothersome is when the city was awarded the Tiger Grant last time, we had many meetings, and we had the debate. What if there was at one point in time we asked ourselves, what if we decided we don't want the grant? And we were told by city engineering and all those who were involved in the grant process that if we, after being awarded the grant, we decide, geez, we're not going to go forward with it, it would jeopardize the city's future opportunities to get another grant, because it's almost like being disrespectful or ungrateful for the award. And I believe that's what Councilor Hirschlag is getting at. That it bothered me before that we kind of painted ourselves into a corner. Again, Councilor Todd, you're spot on. I think it's a good project, but I think it's the process part that kind of gnaws at me a little bit here, which is what happens if we get to the end of the project, or the application's awarded, and we decide, nah, it's not really what we want. Well, keep your money, federal government. What does that do to us next time we want to apply for a Tiger Grant? Does it jeopardize us, or does it put us at the top of the line because, geez, you didn't take it last time, we want to give you more money next time? Don't know, but I think that's what struck me last time in the Tiger Grant process. We got a great project out of it, and it worked well, but there was a wrinkle, and that's the part that, again, that bothers me. I don't know if that's what you're getting at, Councilor Hirschlag, but I'll leave it at that. I'm going to vote for the project. I hope we move it here pretty soon, but.
Okay, thank you. So I think we had a pretty good, healthy discussion. I think everybody's pretty clear on where we're at. Are you ready for the vote?
Yes.
So we have a motion before us. Motion is to authorize the manager to apply by the 16th and to hold the public hearing prior to the grant. Thanks. Everybody clear on the motion?
Mm-hmm.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Noes have it. Is there another motion?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move we accept item 17 as proposed on the agenda.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the item 17. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
The ayes have it. Okay, that takes us to the suspense items. Is there a motion to suspend the rules and take up suspense 1 and 2?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Madam Clerk, item suspense 1, please.
It's a street closure request for the 1883 Black Ice Pond Hockey Championship.
Move approval.
Second. Motion made and seconded to close the street for the 1883 Black Ice Hockey Championship. Any questions, concerns? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Madam Clerk, suspense 2, please.
It's listed as a referral to engineering. It's a communication from Parker Steinberg requesting consideration be made for the installation of a Welcome to East Concord sign at the East Concord roundabout.
Is there a motion?
Yes.
Move approval.
Excuse me.
Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem, welcome to St. Hilaire'ville.
He'll have to go through naming
Second that.
committee.
Will that be a neon sign?
Yeah.
It's a little
Okay,
picture.
motion is made and
Nate's gonna be on
seconded
it?
to refer this item to engineering. Is there any questions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, the ayes have it. Okay. That actually concludes the business for this evening. Is there anything further?
Are there really no public hearings in November?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, seeing none, I would just have strong opinions about how we feel about how the city's run, the state run, as the federal government's run. Well, this is your opportunity to have your voice be heard in the local elections. If you have any questions, I'm sure you can call the clerk's office and they will instruct you as to what you need to do if you have questions, but I encourage you all to get out and vote. So with that, is there anything else? Seeing none, Councilor Bouchard moves, we adjourn, seconded by Councilor Mattson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. Have a great evening, everybody. And by the way, the winner of this evening is, the winner of this evening.